Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleague. I come under Order 42. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, the matter before us is the recent gas explosion in my senatorial district, and two different local governments are involved, the Ifakojai local government and Alimosho local government. I hereby seek the approval of the Senate to allow me to take this motion coming under Order 52. I so summon, Mr. President.
Well, distinguished colleagues, we have listened to our colleague Senator Solomon Adiola Elamilokon is seeking the approval of the Senate to allow him present his motion on the issue he raised. So those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. Ayes have it.
Thank you,
You may present the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleague. The Senate notes that on September 24, 2020, a massive gas explosion occurred at Select Bus Stop, Iju-Shaga in Ifakojai, LGA of Lagos State. Further note that the explosion caused serious body injuries to no fewer than 44 persons while destroying 36 buildings, including a church and an event center and a plank market, as well as destroying 26 vehicles within a radius of 300 meters of the explosion. Regret that the explosion believed to have been caused by the burnt tire igniting a gas leakage of a stock 30-ton gas tanker attempting to extricate itself from a muddy, totally destroyed multi-billion naira properties and businesses of many citizens. Further note that just about 2 weeks later, on October 10, 2020, a similar gas explosion occurred at Kandos Road, Barua Ipaja Ayobo, Alimosho local government area, when an LPG tanker in the process of discharging gas at a gas plant exploded from the spark of a running power generator in the plant. Regret that in the second tragic incident, 18 lives, including a father and a child, were lost with cause of sustaining injuries, while 25 houses and 16 locked-up shops filled with goods worth millions of naira were burnt into ashes. Aware that the Tankers Owners Association of Nigeria estimates that over 80% of all articulate vehicles, as the ones involved in the incident, lack safety protocol requisites to their operation and plying of public roads. Further aware that there have been a recurrence of similar explosion in recent times in the same senatorial district as it happened in 2016, 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2020 at Ileko Kyodo and Abule Ado, worried that Nigerians living and conducting legitimate businesses in my densely populated senatorial district now live in justifiable fears of not only losing their lives or those of loved ones from the frequent explosive fire disaster, but also properties and investment. Commend the officers and men of the LASEMA, Lagos State, and the Federal Fire and Nigerian Police, Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, and ordinary Nigerians on their prompt roles in putting on the inferno resulting from this explosion and mitigating its spread, as well as rescuing victims. Accordingly resolved to 1, observe a minute silence in honor of the innocent Nigerians that lost their lives in the unfortunate national tragedy. 2, write a condolence letter to the people and government of Lagos State. 3, direct the National Emergency Management Agency and the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development to immediately send relief materials to the affected victims and offset medical bills of hospitalized victims. 4, all the regulatory and the licensing authority, like the Department of Petroleum Resources, the DPR, State Stand-on Planning Authority, the Fire Operandi safety procedure and licensing regime of these potential combustible businesses and mode of transportation of gas in Nigeria. 5, direct the Senate Committee on Petroleum Downstream Gas Resources to investigate the remote and immediate causes of this explosion with a view to prevent reoccurrence and report back to the Senate in 2 weeks. I so submit, Mr. President.
Senator Francis Adeniyi.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Senator Francis Adeniyi, representing the group of East. I stand to support my brother, Senator Adeola, representing the good people of Lagos State, on the motion he has just raised. At the same time, I'm standing on the same order 52 to notify the Senate about the same.
Excuse me, please, distinguished. That is not what I'm expecting, please. We're expecting you to second the motion or make your contribution and not move another order. Yes. Senator, are you willing to do either? Are you going to second? And if you have something similar, you can now add it in your presentation and maybe even look at the possibility of either amending the prayers or additional prayers.
I stand to support the motion raised by my people and my brother senator from Lagos State, Senator Adeola, on the pathetic stories of petroleum tanker explosions in Lagos State. I so second.
Would you like to make any contribution? Because if you have something similar, you can amend the resolution, the recommendation, the prayers, or add the prayers at the appropriate stage.
Yes, Mr. President. I have to contribute on the same similar problem in Osun State. The same petroleum tanker explosion on Monday, 12 October 2020, along Akure-Ilesha Road, that claimed 20 lives and many vehicles and properties lost, including an 18-passenger commercial bus that claimed all the lives inside. Mr. President, the accident occurred as a result of collision between two trucks, and it is spread to the whole village around there and claims a lot of lives. Concerned, my prayer is that the good people, the Senate,
My friend,
okay, that every day along that route there is always petroleum tankers explosion that claim a lot of life, and a lot of bodies are already lying in the mortuary. Mr. President, my own addition, we have not started additional prayer. My own additional prayer, sir.
No, we have not come to that stage yet. Have you finished? You can keep the additional prayer until when we come to the prayers. All right. Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, let's go to the prayers. Prayer 1. Observe a minute's silence in honor of innocent Nigerians that lost their lives in the unfortunate national tragedy. Those in favor of prayer 1 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 2. Write a condolence letter to the people and government of Lagos State Those in favor of prayer 2 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 3, direct NEMA and Federal Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development to immediately send relief materials to affected victims and offset medical bills of hospitalized victims. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 4, urge regulatory and licensing authorities like the Department of Petroleum Resources, DPR, State Town Planning Authority, the Fire Service and Federal Road Safety Corps to review the modus operandi, safety procedures and licensing regimes of this potentially combustible business and mode of transportation of gas in Nigeria. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. And prayer 5, direct the Senate committees on petroleum downstream gas resources to investigate the remote and immediate causes of these explosions with a view to prevent recurrence and report back to Senate in 2 weeks. Those in favor of prayer 5 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Senator Fadausi, additional prayer.
Additional prayer that all the additional prayer, the prayers extended to Lagos State people should also be extended to the good people of Osun, the government and the good people of Osun and the families that are involved in this accident. 2, commend the fire service and the Federal Road Safety for their quick response.
No, you hold on a bit because we need someone to second that your motion for additional prayer. But okay, Senator Kola Balogun.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kola Balogun, Oyo South Central District. I rise to second the motion ably moved by Senator Fadausi.
No more. The amendment.
The amendment, sorry.
It's not an amendment, it's an additional prayer. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the additional prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. What is your second additional prayer?
The additional prayer is that the Senate should commend the men of fire service and Federal Road Safety Corps for their quick response. If not, more corps will have been recorded.
Any seconder? Senator Binos Yarododa.
Thank you, Mr. President. Binos Yaro Adama South. I rise to second the additional prayer moved by my senior friend. I so second.
So, those in favor of the additional prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues, for the contributions. Leader of the Senate.
Point of order.
1 minute silence. 1 minute silence, please. May the souls of our departed compatriots rest in perfect peace. Amen.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Ready? How you doing?
Point of order, Senator Uche Lilian Ekunife.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Uche Lilian Ekunife. Mr. President, I represent Anambra Central and from Anambra State. Mr. President, my point of order is order 43, personal explanation.
You may read.
Mr. President, I decided to come under personal explanation because last week we extensively debated on flooding across the nation. But this one happened just last weekend after that extensive discussion on flooding. Mr. President, I wish to crave the indulgence of the Senate to bring to their attention the serious massive flooding of Oka North and other communities of Anambra Central Senatorial District that happened just last weekend. Mr. President, the major causes of this flood have been traced to the abandoned construction works on the federal highway passing through the area and also the very heavy rainfall that has been very persistent. Mr. President, the contract for these roads were awarded to Master Holdings for rehabilitation of Umunna, Ndiago, Amansi, Oka Road since 2012, and also to CGC Nigeria.
I thought you were talking about flood.
All the two projects have been abandoned due to lack of funding since 2012, Mr. President. I also wish to bring to the attention of the Senate that hundreds of houses have been submerged in the flood. Farmlands and crops have also been swept away. Because of this disaster, there is an imminent challenge of waterborne disease, coupled with starvation if emergency actions are not taken to provide for the needs of these displaced persons. Mr. President, I just want to request that we urge Federal Ministry of Works and Housing that as a matter of urgency, ensure a speedy completion of the construction of those roads and provide a permanent and sustainable solution to flooding by embarking on major channelization of those affected areas. 2, to ask the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster and Management and Social Development to urgently provide relief materials to the affected persons and communities. 3, that committees on works, environment, as well as FEMA should visit and evaluate the problems and report back to the Senate within 3 weeks. Mr. President, I also at this point plead with you as the leader of National Assembly to please come to our rescue. My people are truly displaced because of the issues I've enumerated in this point of order. Mr. President, I so submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Because you have come under order 43, is not open to debate, but I want to urge the authorities you have mentioned to take note of what you have indicated. So all those authorities I have mentioned should take note. Thank you. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the first business of the day is the presentation of a House bill standing in my name on the Institute of Environmental Practitioners of Nigeria Establishment Etc. Bill 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Institute of Environmental Practitioners of Nigeria Establishment Etc. Bill 2020, HB 353, first reading.
Institute of Environmental Practitioners of Nigeria Establishment Etc. Bill 2020, HB 353, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the second business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of distinguished Senator Obasani on the Foreign Exchange Control and Monitoring Act, CAP F-34, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, Repeal and Re-Enactment Bill 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Foreign Exchange Control and Monitoring Act, CAF, F34 LFN 2004, Repeal and Reenactment Bill 2020, SB 525, first reading.
Foreign Exchange Control and Monitoring Act, CAP, F34 LFN 2004, Repeal and Reenactment Bill 2020, SB 525, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the third business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of distinguished Senator Stephen Ekpenyo Obong on the National Environmental Research and Training Institute Establishment, etc. Bill 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, National Environmental Research and Training Institute Establishment, etc. Bill 2020, SB 527, first reading.
National Environmental Research and Training Institute Establishment, etc. Bill 2020, SB 527, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the fourth business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of distinguished Senator Patrick Ifeanyi Uba on the Nigeria Bank for Commerce and Industry Act, CAP N92, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, Repeal Bill 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Nigerian Bank for Commerce and Industry Act, CAP N92 LFN 2004, Repeal Bill 2020, SB 528, first reading.
Nigerian Bank for Commerce and Industry Act, CAP N92 LFN 2004, Repeal Bill 2020, SB 528, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the fifth business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of distinguished Senator Nicholas Olubukola Tofo-Wongo on the Tertiary Education Trust Fund Act 2007, Amendment Bill 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Tertiary Education Trust Fund Act 2007 Amendment Bill 2020, SB 529, first reading.
Tertiary Education Trust Fund Act 2007, Amendment Bill 2020, SB 529, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the sixth business of the day is the presentation of the reports of the Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions in respect of A, petition from Finian Tobias Okoro on behalf of 26 other lecturers of the Nigerian Maritime University, Okere Nkoko, whose appointments were allegedly terminated by the university without justifiable cause. B, petition from Osotoye Shegun Kayode against the Nigerian Correctional Service for erroneously including his name on the retirement list of senior officers of the service. C, petition from Utoma Eric Susan and 5 others on behalf of Okpono Konu Urban Community, OUC, against Shell Petroleum Development Company and Chief Charles Ayemi Botu for denying Okpono Konu community of oil contracts and accruable benefits from Shell Petroleum Development Company operations at Okpono Konu. Petition D, petition from Senator Bode Ola on behalf of Cornerstone Montessori Schools against Federal Capital Development Authority for the secret and illegal redesign and grabbing of his plot number E27/3277 in Apo Resettlement by the Federal Capital Development Authority, FCDA. And E, petition from senators of Akwa Ibom State against the nomination of Mr. Lami Oyoguda as Director General of Security and Exchange Commission, instead of nominating Mary Uduk, who was already serving as Acting Director General at the Commission. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Patrick Akinyelure, Chairman of the committee, to move the motion for the Senate to receive the report.
Distinguished Senator Patrick Ayo Akinyelure, all over one.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, my name remains Ayo Akinyelure. Mr. President, I rise to move that the Senate do receive the report of the Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petition in respect of the following. 1. Petition from Finian Tobias Okoro on behalf of 26 other lecturers of Nigerian Maritime University, Okeren Koko, whose appointments were allegedly terminated by the university without justifiable cause. B. Petition from Oshotoye Shegun Kayode against Nigerian Correctional Service for erroneously including his name on the retirement list of senior officers of the service. C. Petition from Otuma Eric Susen and 5 others on behalf of Okokonu Oban Community, OUC, against Shell Petroleum Development Company and Chief Charles Ayemi Botu of denying Okokonu Community of oil contracts and accruable benefits from Shell Petroleum Development Company operations at Okokonu. D. Petition from Senator Bodiola on behalf of Cornerstone Monitoring Schools against the Federal Capital Development Authority (FCDA) for the secret and illegal redesign scrapping of his plot number E27/3277 in Akko resettlement by the Federal Capital Development Authority (FCDA). And finally, Mr. President, petition from senators of Akwa Ibom State against the nomination of Mr. Lamido Yaguda as Director General of Security and State Commission (SEC) instead of nominating Mary Udo, who was already serving as acting Director General at the Commission. Mr. President, I so move to seek the indulgence of the Senate to lay this report of this petition. Thank you.
I need a seconder. Yes, Senator Danjumala.
Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. I'm Senator Danjuma, President Kaduna South. I rise to second the motion raised by Chairman Ethics and Privileges to be led. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate do receive the report of our Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. You may lead the reports, Chairman.
Because it's certainly you with so much responsibility. Yes. Okay.
Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the first order of the day is a motion requesting the Senate to consider the request of Mr. President, Commander-in-Chief, for the confirmation of the nomination of 3 persons for appointment as executive directors of the Board of Federal Road Maintenance Agency in accordance with Section 2, Subsection 3 of the Federal Road Maintenance Agency as amended, year 2007. They are as follows. Number 1, Engineer Ifeanyi Christian Kamelu, Southeast, Member and Executive Director. Number 2, Mohammed Gambo Bizi, Northeast, Member and Executive Director. Number 3, Professor Abubakar Ismail, Northwest, Member and Executive Director. Mr. President, distinguished senators, for the purpose of this motion on the order paper is the request of Mr. President Commander-in-Chief to be referred to the relevant committee for further legislative action. I therefore move that the request of Mr. President Commander-in-Chief be referred to the appropriate committee for further action. So move.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Sayin Nayabaribe, representing Abia South. I second the motion ably moved by the leader.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate do refer to the request of Mr. President, C&C, to the appropriate committee for further legislative action, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. The request is referred to the Senate Committee on FEMA to report back within 2 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the second order of the day is the presentation and consideration of the report of the Committee on INEC on the screening of Dr. Chukwumeka Chukwu for appointment as a resident electoral commissioner representing Abia State in the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Kabiru Gaya, Chairman of the committee, to move the motion for the presentation and consideration of the report.
Distinguished Senator Kabiru Ibrahim Gaya.
Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I am Kabiru Gaya, representing the people of Kano South from Kano State. Mr. President, I would like to move the motion that the Senate do receive and consider the report of the Committee on Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, on the screening of the nomination of Dr. Chukwumeka Chukwu for appointment as Resident Electoral Commissioner, INEC, representing Abia State. I so move, Mr. President.
I need a seconder. Senator Sabi Abdullah Aliu, Deputy Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Aliu Sabi Abdullahi. I rise to second the motion ably moved by the chairman of the Committee on Independent National Electoral Commission that this Senate do consider the report on the screening of nominee for confirmation as Resident Electoral Commissioner representing Abia State Independent National Electoral Commission. I so second, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate do receive and consider the report of our Committee on INEC, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. You may let the report. Present the report now.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, the Senate at the sitting on Wednesday, 22nd July 2020, deliberated on the request by Mr. President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for the confirmation of nomination of Dr. Chukwumeka Chukwu for appointment as the Resident Electoral Commissioner Rep for the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, representing Abia State. And it is in its wisdom the Senate referred the same to this committee through referral orders based order dated 23rd July 2020 for further legislative action. Mr. President, the confirmation, I wouldn't want to take too much of our time. We're having debate of budget. The confirmation of the nomination or appointment of nominee Dr. Chukwumeka Chukwu as State Resident Electoral Commissioner representing Abia State was made under Section 1531F of the Constitution. Further, this request was made pursuant to the provision of Section 1541 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended, which requires the appointment of the chairman and members of any of the bodies so established under Section 1531F shall be made by the President, and the appointment shall be subject to confirmation by the Senate, as stated below. Background information, Mr. President, I would like to go to that he is a PhD holder. He has BSc, MSc, PhD holder, and his working experience have worked in many places. He gathered from 2007 to date. Mr. Chukwu has been a lecturer and supervisor in various universities and departments of education. Mr. President, the members of the committee asked the nomination questions, and he was able to answer questions diligently, and he is qualified to be a commissioner. And I go to the conclusion, Mr. President. I do not want to take too much time of the Senate. To the findings. The findings is on page 9 of my report. The committee found the nominee suitable for the position of rec, having made the following findings during the course of the screening: that no petition or incriminatory report was received against the nominee. Number 2, that the nominee passes the requisite educational qualification for the position of rec. That the nominee displayed a high level of intelligence and appeared to have the temerity to hold the office of rec. The nominee is not affiliated to any political party. He had never participated in any political rally or campaign. The nominee was a person of integrity. He was within the age bracket for the position sought. Observation.
Order.
That the nominee Dr. Chukwu Emeka Chukwu has satisfied the requirement of section 1541, section 14(1) and 2 of the third schedule, part 1F, as contained in the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria as amended, and order 119 and 121 of the Senate Standing Order 2015 as amended. Mr. President, for the avoidance of doubt, section 14(1) and 2 of the third schedule, part 1F, provide that the Independent Electoral Commission shall comprise of the following members: A chairman who shall be the Chief Electoral Commissioner, and 12 members to be known as National Commissioners, and a member of the Commission shall be non-partisan and a person for unquestionable integrity. B, not less than 40 years of age, and in case of chairman, not less than 35 years of age in the case of National Commissioners. Committee resolution, Mr. President, having studied the nominee's curriculum vitae and other relevant documents, in addition to exhaustive instruction and deliberation, the committee members were enormously satisfied with the nominee, considering his wealth of experience, exposure, performance, qualification, competence, and integrity as required by the Constitution, and found him suitable for the appointment of Resident Electoral Commissioner. Recommendation, Mr. President, after careful scrutinization of all the relevant documents of the nominee and the consideration of his level of exposure, experience, performance, qualification, integrity, and compliance with constitutional provisions cited on paragraph 90 above, the Senate Committee on Independent Electoral Commission hereby recommends as follows: that the Senate do confirm the nomination of Dr. Chukwu Emeka Chukwu as Resident Electoral Commissioner Rec, representing Abia State Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. My distinguished colleagues, on behalf of the members of this committee, I wish most sincerely thank the President of the Senate and other principal officers, and indeed the entire distinguished members of this Senate, for giving the Senate Committee on Independent Electoral Commission, INEC, the opportunity to serve in this regard. I so move, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, any comments? Leader of the Senate, Committee of the Whole.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, I move that the Senate resolve in the Committee of the Whole to consider the report of the Committee of Independent National Electoral Commission. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate resolves into Committee of the Whole to consider the report of INEC, our Committee on INEC, say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Distinguished colleagues, we do approval now. Will the Senate approve the nomination of Dr. Chukwu Emeka Chukwu for appointment as a resident electoral commissioner representing Abia State in the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, I rise to move a motion for the chair to resume plenary to report progress. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate reverse to plenary for the chair to report progress, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The Senate in the Committee of the Whole considered the report of the Committee on Independent National Electoral Commission INEC on the screening of Mr. President's nominee for appointment as resident Electoral Commissioner REC representing Abia State, and approved the nomination of Dr. Chukwu Emeka Chukwu as resident Electoral Commissioner REC representing Abia State. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Thank you. Confirmation. Will the Senate confirm the nomination of Dr. Chukwu Emeka Chukwu for appointment as a resident Electoral Commissioner representing Abia State in the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The nomination of Dr. Chukwu Emeka Chukwu is hereby confirmed as resident Electoral Commissioner representing Abia State in the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. Congratulations to Dr. Chukwu Emeka for this opportunity to serve our country. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the third order of the day is the resumption of the adjourned debate on the 2021 Appropriation Bill 2020. That is the second allotted day, today the 14th of October, year 2020. Distinguished senators will recall that the Senate commenced debate on the 2021 Appropriation Bill on Tuesday, 13th October 2020. And so far, 12 senators have contributed further debates. Have contributed, and further debates were deferred until the next legislative day, which is today. Mr. President, with your permission, I move that the Senate do resume the debate on the 2021 Appropriation Bill, and I so move, Mr. President.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Before we start the debate, we have to activate our time keeper. Sorry, Chief, what did you say? Okay, we have a maximum of 30 minutes. No, 30 minutes for now. We have about almost 40-something senators, 42 who have signified interest to speak today. Okay, 43 with DSP. So 3 minutes, but for the DSP is minutes infinitum. DSP.
Thank you, Mr. President of the Omo Agege Delta Central Senatorial District. First, let me thank you for that courtesy. But I will not be utilizing that. No, yes. My mic is on. I thank you for the courtesy, but I will not be utilizing that privilege, as my remarks will be brief. Mr. President, I begin by thanking you for effectively leading the National Assembly to restore to our nation the January to December stable and predictable budget cycle. Mr. President, this has very huge positive ramifications for micro and macroeconomic projections and business planning in general. Mr. President, let me begin by saying that I support and will vote to pass.
Minority Leader, I think you need to listen to the DSP. Okay.
Mr. President, let me begin by saying that I support and will cast my vote to pass this budget as submitted by Mr. President. But having said that, I have just two comments to make, Mr. President. The first, Mr. President, this budget is based on two predicates. The first one, Mr. President, is the $40 per barrel benchmark, and the second is the daily oil production estimate of 1.86 million barrels, inclusive of the condensates of 300,000 to 400,000 barrels per day. Mr. President, like I indicated in the debate for the 2020 budget, for us to be able to achieve this, Mr. President, for us to be able to achieve this 1.86 million barrels per day, certain things must be in place. Mr. President, we must have peace, and indeed maintain the peace in the Niger Delta region before we can achieve this. Mr. President, when I say this, it's beginning to sound like a broken record. Every day, Mr. President, for those of us who represent the Niger Delta, Mr. President, we hardly sleep. We are very, very worried, we are very, very concerned, because these are the people that lay the golden goods for that takes care of this economy. But Mr. President, they are jobless. There's nothing for these youth to do. And that is why we've maintained, Mr. President, that it is very, very important that the youths in these communities are engaged. And the only way they can be engaged, Mr. President, is for these oil companies, Mr. President, the oil companies who explore oil in these communities, in the Niger Delta. It is very, very important, Mr. President, that they help in creating jobs for these people. And the only way they can do that, Mr. President, is to have their headquarters, their business operations located within the Niger Delta. Now, when we say that, I know some people don't see that to mean anything, because they derive benefit from the taxes and the employment opportunities derivable therefrom by having them in their state. Mr. President, these people, these companies, they belong in the Niger Delta. In the absence of these job opportunities, you have all of them. If you look at the bulk of the people who are participating today in these agitations against SARS, these are our people. The only reason they're in the street is because there are no job opportunities for them. So, Mr. President, once again, I want to appeal that the oil companies doing businesses in this country, they have to relocate their headquarters back to the region, Mr. President. Now, Mr. President, I haven't said that, I also want to touch on something else. In the absence of these oil companies actually operating within the state, the infrastructure that we have in the region right now is in serious state of decay. As we speak right now, the major road connecting Delta State to Edo State, if you must go to Lagos or wherever from Delta, that is the Delta Benin road. As we speak, it's been cut in half. It's been cut in half, Mr. President. A journey that normally takes about 40 minutes, about 30 minutes, from Warri to Benin, now takes about 6 hours, Mr. President. How do we explain this? How do we explain this to the people? 6 hours for a journey of 40 to 45 minutes. Now, a couple of days ago, I spoke with the Minister of Works, and he laid the blame at the feet of the National Assembly. that because of the budgetary processes we've now adopted, that there's no more room for contingency provisions in the budget. That in the past there were contingency provisions in the budget from which they could take money, either through the ministry or through FEMA, to undertake this kind of repairs. But because of the current budget as written, there's no such contingency. But Mr. President, we may understand that here, but the people in the streets, in Delta, in Edo, in each of those Niger Delta states, they don't understand that, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, it is bad enough that the economy is in the state it is right now, but we also need to at least maintain the little infrastructure that we have right now, so that the people will cease to agitate, Mr. President. Now, finally, Mr. President, there's also something that is troubling our people, and I thought I should also bring this in here. It is clear that the only two sources identified in this budget for the funding of the budget, it's the revenue from oil, for the most part, and borrowings, both local and foreign. But, Mr. President, we also have other sources or potential sources of revenue that have not been looked at. You keep talking about leakages every time. Why even going to leakages when we can go directly to the solid mineral sector? Mr. President, not too long ago, we saw the governor of Zamfara State come before the CBN to present a gold bar worth close to about 5 billion naira. Is it Kebi? I think it's of Zamfara. No. I think it's Zamfara governor, I'm sure. You know, came to present. No. Okay, I don't know there's gold in Kebi, okay. But the one I saw, Mr. President, and that's the one that agitating our people, you know, at home. You know, it's a gold bar of about 5 billion naira, be presented for sale or for purchase to the CBN by the governor of Zamfara State. Mr. President, our people are beginning to wonder who owns this gold, you know, that is being sold to the CBN. You know, because they know that they don't sell oil in Delta State. They don't sell oil in any of the Niger Delta states, you know. So they're wondering why a governor of a state will be selling a gold bar from Zamfara to the CBN. Now, there are two problems there, Mr. President. We believe that whatever revenue that ought to come from that transaction belongs to the entire country. That's number one. And we should actually look into that and not belonging to the state government. But more important than that, Mr. President, that is an area we really need to develop, because there's a lot of revenue that will come from there that will take the burden from these international borrowings. So, Mr. President, on this note, once again, I'd like to say I support the passage of this budget into law. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Chief Whip, the timekeeping starts now. Senator Bima Mohamed Enagi. Senator Bima Mohamed Enagi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Bima Mohamed Enagi. I represent the people of Niger South from Niger State. I rise to add my voice to the debate on the 2021 appropriation bill. I will start by commending Mr. President for the early presentation, the laying of the appropriation bill. I would also want to commend our leadership, the Senate President and Chairman of the National Assembly, for starting this process in a very good time. I will try as much as possible to keep within 3 minutes. I commend Mr. President for the total expenditure of about 13.08 trillion for 2021, which is about 21% above the 2020 budget, despite the contractions in the second quarter and the possibility of the economy going into recession. I consider the budget conservative and achievable. To have made the budget conservative in nature Mr. President and his team have shown a very good understanding of our people and our dear country. Because economies usually go for very high fiscal spending when they are faced with this type of situation. The parameters used for the budget are well thought out. A veritable example is the $40 per barrel for the oil, despite the fact that other OPEC countries like Saudi Arabia are using a benchmark of about $50 per barrel. The 1.8 million barrels per day oil production is also considered conservative, as global fossil demand is expected to rise to increase for the next 25 years. The internally generated revenue is estimated to rise from 5.84 trillion to 8.43 trillion, which represents about 44% increase from that of last year. One could say that this is ambitious, but it is achievable if the revenue generating agencies like NNPC, Customs, FIRS, and the new entrants transmit as expected of them. The capital expenditure increased from 2.69 trillion to 3.85 trillion, which represents about 43% increase, if duly implemented, will go a long way to improve the infrastructural deficit in the country. However, government should consider to increase the capital expenditure and decrease recurrent expenditure over time in order to keep within the international aggregate ratio of government spending. No. Social intervention for the poor and the vulnerable, 100 billion naira for small-scale businesses, off-grid clean energy for households, 100 billion naira support for healthcare and agriculture, 25 billion naira Nigerian Youth Investment Fund, and other supportive programs are quite laudable and commendable. However, as laudable as the budget is, there are areas of concern. Number one, considering the worsening insecurity in the country, one expects the country to spend more on security so as to confront this very evil challenge that is facing us. Number two, the level of fiscal deficit, debt servicing to GDP are areas of serious concern. Thirdly, our annual allocation to agriculture has remained below 3%, negating our commitment to the Malabo Declaration of not lower than 10% of the annual budget. This needs to be addressed. The interest rate in the country is considered high, and with this kind of conservative budget, deposit money banks should be engaged to bring down their interest rates in order to confront the challenges of inflation and possible recession. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I want to make a case for Nigerian roads and appeal passionately to Mr. President that we need to face this issue headlong. We really need to declare an emergency in the road sector. All is not well and Nigerians are suffering. The quantum of man hours wasted on Nigerian roads and...
Distinguished, you may round up now. The chief whip is complaining.
I'm seriously worried about Nigerian roads. I'm seriously worried about Barrow Port that was commissioned by Mr. President in January last year, but up till now, the Barrow Port is not functional. I want to appeal to Mr. President and to my colleagues that when the details of the budget is given to us, this is an area that we must look very closely. The Nigerian roads must be improved upon. The Barrow Port must be made functional. I appeal to my colleagues to support the Barrow Port in the whole northern Nigeria. There is not any inland river port in northern Nigeria. Northern Nigeria is locked, is landlocked. We need a port. We need an inland port. And I want my colleagues to support this idea of having an inland port in the north. Finally, in supporting the second reading of this bill, I strongly suggest that our IGR should be improved. Government must reduce spending, reduce government, especially overhead costs. They intensify the fight against corruption.
Distinguished, you have to round up now.
Look into these areas, and I strongly support the second reading of the appropriation bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Senator Mohammed Adamalero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mohammed Adam Aliru is my name. I represent Kebbi Central. Mr. President, let me equally start by commending the President and Commander-in-Chief for presenting the 2021 budget proposal to the National Assembly in good time. Having said that, Mr. President, let me equally commend the President for setting up or establishing the infrastructure company. Mr. President, I said time without number in this chamber that there is no way we can fund over 600 roads in the country if we rely on annual budgetary provision. And I equally propose that the National Assembly should come up with a workable solution on how to fund infrastructure in this country. And for that reason, I recommend public-private partnership. Even yesterday during the lead debate, the leader of the Senate mentioned it. I'm happy Mr. President has accepted that idea, and funding for this company will come from the CBN, from Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, Africa Finance Corporation, African Development Bank, foreign and local investors that are interested in providing infrastructure in Nigeria are all going to contribute to the funding of this company. Mr. President, this is the only way our roads can be in good shape. Virtually every senator that stood up to speak, he think about road project in his constituency, road project in his state, road project in his geopolitical zone. The solution now is infrastructure company, as said by Mr. President. So I urge all my colleagues to support this initiative, and we will do everything possible to ensure that this company take off with enough funds so that road rehabilitation and road construction can be a thing of the past. Equally important, Mr. President, is the issue of agriculture. I'm not too happy with the provision in the budget, just about 100 billion. This amount is grossly inadequate. The only consolation is that the CBN is going to complement whatever is provided in the budget through the Anchor Borrower Scheme. But the line ministry, saddled with the responsibility of developing agriculture in Nigeria, should be supported. Particularly if you are talking about diversification of the economy. I don't see how you can diversify the economy, particularly that of Nigeria, without concentrating on agriculture. Agriculture holds the key for the diversification of the economy in Nigeria. We have not done much in this area. Even the so-called presidential initiative on fertilizer, which is currently going on. Fertilizer is now a scarce commodity to our farmers. I'm a farmer. Abdullah Adamu is also a farmer. But we are finding it difficult to access fertilizer at 5,000 naira, as said by presidential initiative on fertilizer. So I believe there are some people who are serving as intermediaries that are benefiting from the so-called, from the so-called subsidy that is being given by the federal government. Mr. President, we should look into this so that our farmers should benefit from it. Mr. President, the budget has a huge recurrent expenditure. Mr. President, there is no way a country can grow if all we have is to service, the government. We have virtually little for capital expenditure. We are spending close to about 7 billion naira out of the 10 billion naira proposed for the 2021 appropriation. Mr. President, that amount is too huge. If we want to develop this country, we should have a ratio of 30-70. 30 for recurrent, 70 for capital. If we don't do that, there is no way we can have the required growth. Mr. President, on the issue of solid minerals, nothing has been said about solid minerals, or very little has been said about solid minerals. We have said that Nigeria is very rich in solid minerals, and we can earn close to about $90 billion if we actually concentrate on exploitation of the solid minerals we have in this country. And how much are we earning on oil? Not more than 30 billion naira per annum. Now, this is a sector that has a lot of potentials, but unfortunately, we have not, made use of it. Mr. President, we should look into the way we can develop the solid minerals in this country so that we can have maximum benefit. By so doing, we will be able to diversify the economy. The manufacturing sector, Mr. President, is also in a comatose situation. Virtually all the industries in Nigeria are closed because of power, because of coronavirus. We should do whatever is humanly possible to revive them. Some of them have even run to Ghana, producing from Ghana and sent them to Nigeria. This shouldn't be, because Nigeria has the market, we have the population. This is where the consumption should be. And this is where the manufacturing sector should be set up. If we don't do this, Mr. President, we are not doing justice to our people. We are simply allowing employment to elude us, going to neighboring countries, then bringing finished goods for us to consume. So we should look into this, Mr. President, with the view of correcting the situation. Mr. Wish colleagues, thank you very much for listening.
Senator Ahmad Babakaita. Piggy, I think we can have the chief whip to give you a seat.
These new senators, when they come now. Thank you, Mr. President. I remain Ahmed Babakaita, representing Katsina North. Mr. President, I came with volumes and volumes of a document to discuss this budget, but however, most of what I want to discuss has already been what?
Where is your seat? Where is your seat?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll go straight to my discussion would go straight to my committee vis-a-vis the budget. So the capital expenditure as a key capital spending allocation of the budget allocation ministry is to go 127 billion and universal basic education 70 billion, which is a progress in terms of funding from what we had last year. This is very encouraging. The government is aggressively implementing several robust measures to overcome fiscal constraints that could impair full budget realization. The government shall be leveraging on technology and automation in the monitoring and management of internally generated revenues towards addressing revenue leakages and redirecting scarce resources for the benefit and sustainable infrastructure development to support education. This effort includes the regulation of the price of petroleum products, ongoing verification exercise with IPPS, and resolving issues around university transparency and accounting solution UTAS. Implementation of service-based electricity tariffs, among others. Mr. President, with the regulation of the price of petroleum product, The new petrol pricing regime is expected to free up resources that were hitherto allocated to subsidize petroleum products. Similarly, the ongoing IPPIS verification exercise has closed gaps that encourage ghost workers or pensioners at the agitation of the implementation of UTAS for IPPS is under serious negotiation with ASU members under the watch of the President of the Senate. So intelligently to enable reopening of higher institutions for our wards to go back to school with observed protocol for COVID-19. The service reflective electricity tariff would help resolve liquidity crisis in the power sector and make the sector attractive to foreign investment. These reforms are expected to release trillions of naira for allocation to priority areas. The education sector, Mr. President, will continue to play its role of turning citizens into assets for national development. In this regard, we will count on the usual support of Nigerian and stakeholders alike in the education sector in the country to contribute immensely in the actualization of the implementation of Budget 2021. Education is crucial for national broad-based economic growth and poverty reduction, and therefore it requires sufficient funding and timely releases to make Nigeria great. A strong education system has impactful multiplier effect on other sectors such as agriculture, health, democracy, and good governance, and therefore we all have it as a responsibility to improve and standardize the sector to achieve its overall and specific objective. The deserved attention accorded Northeast Development Commission, NEDC, Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, and Youth Empowerment will guarantee peace, general security, and rapid development of the country. The Nigerian President, Muhammad Buhari, deserves commendation for providing for possible leadership at this critical period of our nation. Mr. President, I thank you immensely for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Senator Albert Basi Akpan.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Chief Whip, please keep the time.
My distinguished and respected colleagues, Senator Albert Basi Akpan, Akwa Ibom Northeast. Mr. President, I believe that as a Senate, we have come to the consciousness that there is a generation of Nigerians that has woken up to take their future in their own hands, which are the youth of this country. Mr. President, today we have seen the youth rising up to defend their country on the issue of the NSAS campaign. Tomorrow, it might be good governance or electoral reform. Therefore, Mr. President, as the Senate and as the National Assembly, I think we have a responsibility that must not be relegated. Mr. President, I believe also very strongly, Mr. President, that looking at the budget, I believe that as a government, the National Assembly is a part of this government. If this government fails, it means I have failed myself. And if the government fails, it means you have failed yourself. Therefore, we must do everything humanly possible, Mr. President, using the instrumentality of the powers that has been given to us by the Constitution of this country, the power of proportion, to make sure that the budget reflects the aspirations and the yearnings and the expectations of Nigerians. Mr. President, we all know the effect and the negative impact that the pandemic has had in our economy. But I believe very strongly, Mr. President, that there are two instruments. Either you use the monetary instrument of exchange rate management and interest rate, or you use the fiscal instrument of government expenditure and taxed instruments. Mr. President, here it is good for us as a country to increase government expenditure to fight economic depression. But looking at the budget, Mr. President, of course you know that the budget has a total revenue projections of 7 point something trillion, a deficit of 5 point something trillion. which therefore means that, and then a capital expenditure of 3 point something trillion. Mr. President, if you look at the difference between the deficit of 5.9 trillion and the capital expenditure, it therefore means that 2.6 trillion of what we are going to borrow is going to use to service recurrent expenditure. So I believe, Mr. President, that a lot still needs to be done in that regard. And I know that when the NTEF came, Mr. President, into this National Assembly, it came with a benchmark exchange rate of 360. But by the time we left, based on the aspirations of Nigeria, we left at the exchange rate of about 3.79. I believe that, Mr. President, that difference would have been used to bring down the deficit instead of increasing expenditure, because currently, Mr. President, we are using 60%, just like Susan has said yesterday, 60% of our revenue to pay our debts. And government expenditure alone will not take out of this doldrum. What policy, what effects are we leaving for the private sector to equally, because that's the platform where these jobs can be created. And Mr. President, let me also say that, Mr. President, we don't know the content of this budget, but I'm speaking on behalf of the senators from Cross River and senators from Akwa Ibom, just like the Deputy President has exactly said. The Calabar-Itu Road, Mr. President, which is the thoroughfare to the north and thoroughfare to the south. That Calabar, it was awarded in 2015. I knew that I brought a motion to this Senate in 2015, and it was awarded in 2017, Mr. President. Up to now, I'm not sure that road has been funded to the tune of about 20%. It has become so deplorable that the two states, and southeast and the north, have been cut off by the state of that road. So I want to plead with you, on behalf of our colleagues, that we should do something most reasonable that will also give us, in that side of the divide, a sense of belonging. Mr. President, finally, we have been told that, because having looked at the President's speech, that the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway and the second Niger Bridge is being funded by sovereign wealth funds. So we need to understand what is the balance, because we need to understand what is the balance, because funds on this budget can be freed to other sectors and other regions of the country, so that we can also feel the impact of governance. So I support this budget, and I believe that as the National Assembly, we will not relegate our
I think we have to round up now.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. The Distinguished Senator Shambasi.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Geshambasi, Cross River South. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me first of all wholeheartedly put my weight behind Senator Albert Bassi and his plea for the Calabar-Itu Road. Let me even throw more light on it. There is a section of that road. There's a section of that road there's a section of that road that is yet to be awarded. So even though Julius Berger was awarded this contract, there is a critical section of that road that is yet to be awarded. And so as I join Senator Albert to plea for the funding of that project, I want to also plead with the executive that that road and the complete and total road should be awarded, including the section, the unawarded section of that road. Mr. President, the President's speech talks about four main thematic areas: economic recovery, promote economic diversification, enhance competitiveness, and then social inclusion. And then overall, he talks about lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in the next 10 years. Mr. President, my issue is these are really laudable objectives, and I want to agree wholeheartedly with His Excellency, our President. But how are we going to do it? Because I see the budget, and there are some areas that I am not quite clear about. For instance, we have a 13 trillion naira budget.
But at the same time, we are talking about increasing taxes. And yet, we want to create economic activity in this economy. This is at odds with the objective of the president to increase, to bring about economic recovery. Secondly, okay, just to round up, in conclusion, I'll just speak to one area. In conclusion, the issue of infrastructure, which is key to achieving all the objectives of His Excellency the President. Infrastructure is not just building infrastructure, it is maintaining infrastructure. FEMA has a budget of about 30 billion naira in this year's budget from all indications. And yet the Federal Ministry of Works, which controls the FEMA budget, has a budget of 400 billion naira. Now, how are we going to maintain our infrastructure if we do not provide adequate funding for the maintenance of our 36,000 kilometer road infrastructure? I think some of the inconsistencies in the budget need to be looked at, and we need to it's not consistent. It's inconsistent with...
Don't listen to the side talks.
Anyway, so I think some of these inconsistencies need to be looked at in this budget so that we can achieve the objectives that this budget is meant to achieve. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. Before I call Senator Anyewuchi to make his contribution, let me make this comment. Senators Albert Basi Akpan and of course my brother Senator Geshem Basi alluded to the need to construct or rehabilitate some roads in the south-south, especially between Akwa Ibom and Cross River State. Those roads, we were told by Senator Basi, were awarded. I think you should trust the government that if we could have an administration that lasted 16 years and didn't do anything about those roads, and then you have now you can see the hand of government in the construction of the second Niger bridge. You can attest to the fact that the way the second Niger bridge is going is the way all the roads across the country will be treated. So I want to assure you that government will definitely come back to deal with those roads since the contracts have been awarded. So I think the major thing has been done. And we'll continue to push, especially in the south-south, so that the south-south people see the benefit of having this administration or the party in government, at least that we are keeping to our promises. Senator Anyewuchi.
Thank you, Mr. President, for that assurance. My name is Senator Anyewuchi, and I represent Imo East Senatorial District. Mr. President, let me join my colleagues in commending Mr. President for early submission of the budget estimate, which will enable us to do the needful to meet our budget cycle. Mr. President, I have some concerns about the estimate that has been laid. First of all, I'm looking at the revenue projection. There's a revenue projection of 7.8 trillion. Mr. President, I think it has not taken into consideration the macroeconomic environment, especially external environment. I also think, Mr. President, that the uncertainty in the global economy has not been taken into consideration in reaching that decision. Because what is going to happen is that at the end of the day, we might resort to taking loans to fund the budget deficit. And Mr. President, that brings me to the issue of our debt profile. As of today, Nigerian debt stands at 31 trillion naira. And there's also a plan by the government to borrow an additional 4.2 trillion in order to fund the budget deficit. Mr. President, I think that this issue of resorting to loans in order to meet financial obligation is totally wrong. For me, there is nothing inherently wrong in taking of loans. But my question is, the loans we are taking, what is it going to be used for? Those loans, are they going to be used for infrastructural development? Because any loan that is not used for such development infrastructurally, that will stimulate the economy and ensure growth of the economy, I think, Mr. President, that loan is misdirected. For now, Mr. President, I want to say that we have a debt of 31 trillion hanging over our neck as a nation. And there is no commensurate development with regards to the loan of 31 trillion that we already have. If you look at what is going on now, most of the areas like in the southeast, where you have huge commercial activities, we don't have good roads linking us to other parts of the country. We don't have good rail system linking us to other parts of the country, moving goods from where it is produced to where it is needed. So, Mr. President, I want to say that we should look at equity funding instead of running at each time to go and borrow money. Let us look at equity participation as a nation, which I think will be more sustainable, which I think is better and more sustainable. Mr. President, I also want us to look at blocking leakages. If we're able to block leakages, we will not be running to take loans, because it's just like an individual where you have sources of revenue and you're going to take money. So if we block those leakages, Mr. President, I think we will know exactly what our needs are and we will borrow according to our needs. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Deputy Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Robert Ajaibo, representing Ondo North Senatorial District. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, I want to join the previous speakers in appreciating Mr. President for presenting a budget which I consider focused and very realistic. This is in view of the coronavirus pandemic, which has thrown the global economy into a serious problem. Even if we look at the industrialized countries, we'll see that the effect has been very, very heavy, not to talk of a developing country like us. In fact, that in face of recession, that Mr. President is able to fund the 2020 capital up to the level of 50% shows his ability to manage this economy. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I do not want to repeat what other people have said in commenting and commending Mr. President on this project. But however, I want to say that I identify myself with the emphasis laid in the areas that have been of concern to Nigerians. That is security, infrastructure, diversification of the economy, health, education, and power. Of course, the issue of security is very important because it has a pervasive effect on different sectors of the economy. Whether we are talking of industrialization, or we are talking of tourism, or we are talking of transportation, even farming and mining, we need security. Only a secured nation can be prosperous. So if we want to be prosperous as a nation, we must pay due cost in ensuring that the nation is secured. Mr. President, some of our colleagues have spoken about the infrastructural company, which I think is very important. It is important because it's going to draw resources from the private sector, and it allowed us to free some money to be diverted to more important areas of health and education. I think this is a very important and welcome innovation in the budget. Mr. President, I also noticed that little mention has been made of the solid mineral in Mr. President's speech. Of course, if we unlock the potentials of our solid mineral, it will be a great advantage in diversification of our economy. I have from the reliable sources that our solid mineral potential is far, far higher than that of South Africa. And if we are able to tap into this area of our natural resources, then we'll be able to manage this economy better. Mr. President, the area of agriculture is also commendable that Mr. President is placing so much emphasis on agriculture. But I'm really surprised that the research institutes are not brought in. The research institutes are supposed to come up with innovations in the area of new varieties, in the area of bringing about crops that are resistant to diseases and the environment, and also increase in acreage. These can be then taken to the farmers and then make the agricultural innovation very, very successful. And I think in implementing this policy of budget on agriculture, the research institutes will be brought in. It is very sad that at the moment we import 50% of palm oil that we consume in this country, despite that we have the environment that favors the development of palm oil plantation. I'm also happy, Mr. President, that the social investment program is going on. We have just finished the election in those states, and we can see the rate at which young boys who have no job are, harassing people, making life unbearable. And I think the social investment program, if continued, will address this area by providing jobs for the masses of our people. Mr. President, as I said, I do not intend to repeat what others have said. I will only say that I support it, and I am sure that my colleagues will support the passage of this 2021 budget in the interest of all. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you so very much. Senator Michael Opemi Bamidele.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I'm Michael Opemi Bamidele. I represent Ekiti Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, I thank you for the privilege of also contributing to the ongoing debate on the general principles of the Appropriation Bill 2021. Mr. President, I note with a sense of responsibility and gladness that there is a further increase in capital expenditure in the 2021 proposed budget to the tune of 29%. And I want to say that 29%, yes, it is not yet uhuru, because we can do better than that, but it is the best so far. And every year, this administration has done better than the year before in terms of increasing the percentage of capital expenditure, which is what we need to continue to drive our economy and enhance capital development, infrastructural development. However, Mr. President, I just want to make a special appeal, because there isn't so much we can say in 3 minutes discussing this budget. But I want to make a special appeal
to the leadership of the Senate and to our colleagues in Senate that as we approve the budget proposal this year, we must have reforms on our minds. It is not enough, Mr. President, for us to approve another budget, for instance, for the defense sector, without us asking certain questions. We have called on Mr. President again and again to do something with respect to our service chiefs. Of course, it is at the discretion of Mr. President. But it's not also enough for us to approve budget for the defense for 2021 without us asking questions or asking to be further briefed on what has changed or what is changing. It's not enough for us to approve money again for the police without asking questions as to what manner of reforms actually are being carried out. It's not enough for us to be told SARS has changed to SWAT. What are the fundamentals? What is the content of this change? What are
Distinguished Opemi, I think we have not been told that SARS has been changed to SWAT. We have been told SARS has been disbanded and SWAT has been created. And my understanding is the SARS people will now go through what the IG said, is it? Okay, psychological tests and some retraining. So it's not like the SARS people are now transformed into SWAT. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are on the same page on this, and I go by your choice of word and choice of language. But my point, which is very clear, sir, is just to be able to say that beyond nomenclature, we must be clear as to the fundamentals and the contents of this new move, this new arrangement, this new creation. Mr. President, I just said all of these things to be able to emphasize my point that as we approve 2021 budget, we must have reforms on our minds. The youth of this country have found their voice, and we can see what's going on the streets with respect to need for police reforms. Tomorrow it might be any other thing, and we are here to ensure that reforms are driven in overriding public interest. Finally, Mr. President, let me also say that part of the reason for this debate that distinguished members are having on the floor of this parliament is for us to be able to bring our specialized understanding and knowledge to the disposal of the Senate, and for all members to also, based on the various committees in which you have given us privilege to serve, to be able to also look into different sectors of this budget. As I round up, Mr. President, I speak for the judiciary. Just before you drop the gavel, Mr. President, 2 days ago, yesterday, as we were confirming the nomination of 8 justices of the Court of Appeal to serve as justices of Supreme Court, you had said something, that there was the need to give more money to the judiciary to be able to discharge their responsibilities. Mr. President, a sum of 110 billion naira has been earmarked for the judiciary in the 2021 budget. This goes to show that it's either the executive arm of government or the budget office that sits down to put people inside envelopes or sectors inside envelopes. It's either they don't really understand the magnitude of the problem in the judiciary, or they don't feel that anything needs to change. Having 8 additional Supreme Court justices will mean providing office accommodation, providing residential accommodation, providing cars. As we speak, there are 19 vacancies in the Court of Appeal that needs to be filled. Federal High Court will be appointing judges. FCT High Court, NJC just recommended 33 additional judges. These are issues that need to be addressed. And this Senate set up a committee earlier in the year that recommended made far-reaching suggestions, including
the need for some intervention fund for the judiciary, bringing a budget proposal to us for 2021 that does not even take into account all of these, while lawyers are filing cases and we are waiting for 7 years before they can get a date for hearing in the Supreme Court, or 3-4 years before they can get a date for hearing in the Court of Appeal. And we are making provisions in our budget, and all these things are not taken into account. Mr. President, it does not show that anything, is considered to be worth the attention, of those who plan this budget. So I hope and I pray that we'll be able to look into this as the intermediary between the executive arm and the judicial arm of government. I thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Yusuf. Senator Mohammed Sani Musa.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Mohammed Sani Musa, representing Niger East Senatorial District. Looking at the budget, it is necessary for the budget to pull Nigeria out of recession. Whether we like it or not, today our economy is in recession. The federal government projected growth rate of 3% in 2021 financial year might be a bit difficult for us to achieve, but I believe also the inflation target of 11.5% is very optimistic, meaning that we can realize that. Though the budget deficit of 5.2 trillion, which is about 3.6% of the GDP, and the current COVID-19 health crisis have paved way for the health sector as well to observe a whooping 157.0% increase in the allocation to the sector. The education sector saw a significant 65% increase in allocation. In the overall, while the physical plan of the government mirrors the need to reflect the economy following the most devastating effect of COVID-19 pandemic, we think the 2021 budget is very, very optimistic. This is clearly reflected in the revenue, GDP, growth and exchange rate assumptions when compared to current projected realities. I think the revenue agencies have done very well, and they are still doing very well, but there is need for us to tighten kind of supervision on them to make sure that all revenues collected are being accounted for. When we come to talk about infrastructure, we have a very serious problem. Okay, I know you are from the other side. In terms of the infrastructure, I will suggest to the Nigerian government that any state government that use funds to construct road, either trunk A, trunk B, or trunk C, that is the federal road, or state road, or local government road, all roads in Nigeria are roads for Nigeria. Let us use those funds to fund new projects, new roads. We shouldn't maintain one road since colonial days. We should be opening up. So those kind of monies should be channeled for that purpose. Road infrastructure development is the most important linkage to the economic growth and competitiveness of Nigerian economy. Without roads, we can't have anything. We must look at ways to create standard and quality road network, in particular highways and expressways. It is the density and the quality of the road infrastructure which primarily determine the competitiveness of any country. You can't tell an investor to come to Nigeria and you start taking him to Kaduna that you can go in 1 hour. You are going in 5 hours. And still, we are collecting loans, and these loans still cannot be able to fund the roads we are constructing. So we are increasing our deficits. Roads are the arteries through which the economic flows are measured. Cooperation between the public and private sector is very important, which can be powered through incentive for improving the quality and efficiency of public service and a mean of public infrastructure financing. Government should set up a specialized unit to define and implement the country's specific BOT, build, operate, and transfer, private-public PPP policy with a global approach designed to ensure horizontal coordination between various government departments and public bodies, the quantity and quality of general information of all interested bidders or interested investors of BOT or PPP projects be improved in order to minimize the necessity of bidders making their own costly technical investigations. Government should carefully select the payment mechanisms that we have always adopted, especially in projects that were taken from bilateral donors. When we take a fund from a certain country, they will impose their own terms. And if we want that infrastructure, we must go with those terms. But we must also be able to articulate, and see that these terms, are they good for our own people? Are they good for our own development? And where necessary, guarantee sufficient financing or modest subsidy in order to make feasible projects. We shouldn't go on elephant projects that we cannot complete within a specific time frame. We should be able to be doing them according to how much loan or how much money it has been projected for those projects. Risks of BOT projects should also be borne not only by government, but by parties also. Because where there are failures of implementation or in bringing a project on stream, just an example of what is happening in the power sector, the government should not be only the part to take responsibilities of those failures.
Time up.
Both parties should be able to do that. And value for money and the evaluation of overall expected efficiency should determine whatever government projects whatever government project that will be initiated. In the light of the above, I believe that the 2021 budget is a very realistic budget, is feasible, and it can take Nigeria to the next level. Thank you, Mr. President.
Distinguished Senator Engineer Kabir Barkia.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, and Senator Engineer Kabir Barkia, representing Katsina Central. Thank you. Let me start by congratulating Mr. President for presenting this very important budget, and also appreciate the National Assembly for starting the debate as early as possible. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I just want to talk on two issues. First of all, the implementation, and secondly, revenue generation. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me start by revenue generation. If we look at this budget of almost 13-point-something trillion, only 7-point-something trillion is projected revenue, and this revenue, 80% of it comes from oil. So, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, it's very important when we look at this issue of revenue generation. We have other ways we have been saying, like for example, solid mineral resources. Some other African countries, Mr. President, their budgets solely depend on gold, diamond, or iron ore. But we have all these resources, Mr. President, especially in the northern part of the country. Why can't you also be serious on trying to see that, yes, of course, we harness these solid mineral resources. Look at, for example, now, it's very unfortunate that Federal Ministry of Mines and Steel, which of course will be in charge of this issue of solid minerals, it just allocated 10 billion naira, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. 10 billion naira is only for salary or what? So we have to be serious, at least to diversify this revenue generation. We cannot just continue depending on oil. We have seen what had happened during the COVID-19.
When, of course, the oil, of course, cannot be sold even outside the country. So we have to look at it, Mr. President. This budget of 10 billion naira only to mines and steel development is too small. So we have to really look at it. And then, secondly, the implementation, Mr. President, and the Student College. Definitely, if we look at, for example, the nature of releases of this fund, almost every year you see toward the end of the year, the government will make releases. Which, of course, it will not help help the matters. For example, now this budget is just to January. We start from January to December. And now we are in October. Of course, we know we are not unaware of the COVID-19. But just now the release is being done. So only 3 months now to a new year. So we can see at least implementation. Even if, for example, now the MTS wanted to do something reasonable, and the releases are not there. And coupled with also this DPP problem, Mr. President. So we have to look at this implementation very seriously. Because, for example, now if you say, okay, Mr. President just said that he is not Secretary of Finance to release only 50%. Of course, maybe from that 50, that's the end of the releases of this year. So, and then only 3 months remain to the end of this year. The end of this year, Mr. President. So therefore, we have to look at these 2 issues. Implementation of this budget, whichever sector, health, education, infrastructure. Of course, I had many of my colleagues talk of road. Yes. So definitely, if, for example, there's adequate releases, and also the implementation, proper implementation, definitely we will not have all these problems. And just I said also the issue of the revenue generation. So, Mr. President, I really appreciate the leaders for starting the debate earlier, and I wish that these 2 issues is looked into, Mr. President, distinguished colleague. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Samuel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Sam Egu. I represent Ebonyi North Senatorial District. Mr. President, I'm going to talk on 2 issues. One is on the borrowing. Mr. President, we know that if we properly account and manage our resources, we may not be going to borrow all the time for our projects. Even if we are going to borrow, the amount we are going to borrow will not be as big as much as it is today. Our inability to manage our resources is the cause of this problem we have found ourselves. And I feel that the earlier we tackle that issue, because if you don't manage properly now, even at the time we start repaying that loan, we'll be in trouble. If not ourselves, our children. The government has tried to introduce some measures by introducing the treasury single account, which is a step in the right direction. And I think that issue has helped reduce the multiplicities of accounts of our agencies, and therefore reduce losses and abuses of these funds. But we need to do more to reduce wastages in our system in order to have money to execute our projects. Mr. President, to reduce the cost of governance, there is need to go back to the report of the Presidential Committee on Restructuring and Rationalization of Federal Government Parastatals, Commissions and Agencies, otherwise known as the Orosanya Report. Mr. President, the duplication of federal government agencies with overlapping responsibilities has made the cost of governance unbearable. With the current financial crisis that has led us to go into borrowing, and I believe that if these agencies are merged and those that are not necessarily removed from the system, it will reduce the cost of governance, and that will help the government. Secondly, Mr. President, we have our youth that are very restive. We have situations where getting jobs is difficult. And each year we are turning thousands, hundreds of thousands of graduates to the labor market. We have to deliberately introduce projects and realign existing projects to focus on job creation and youth and women empowerment. The rate of unemployment and frustration across the nation is alarming. We therefore need to create jobs and opportunities for our teeming youth and women through this budget process. They may not all be going for government jobs, but if we create the enabling environment that will enable them to go into their private activities or private sector, I think we have it as a duty to use this current budget to create that enabling environment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Senator Abu Moro.
It's my turn. Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Abba Moro, representing the very good people of the Benue South Senatorial District. Mr. President, it gladdens my heart that once again we are talking and debating the general principles of the 2021 budget after the 2020 budget. As properly questioned, budget of economic recovery and resilience, I do see some flashes of good tidings, but Mr. President, when you look at the details, we still have a lot of work to do. And so, Mr. President, rising on this premise, I want to say that we still have a lot of work to do in education, because, Mr. President, if we must attain good results and achieve our Millennium Development Goals 4 in education, we still have to look in the direction of meeting the minimum standard, UNESCO minimum standard on allocation of our budget to education. Mr. President, in 2021, we have 70 billion naira allocated to universal basic education and 545 for the Ministry of Education in the current expenditure. For capital project, we have about 127 billion. If you look at it, Mr. President, there is an improvement in the allocation. But if you put the aggregate together, we still have not arrived at any reasonable level in the threshold recommended by UNESCO. But be that as it may, Mr. President, I want to say that if we agree that education represents a very vital instrument in our drive towards national development, if we must use education as a tool to lay a foundation for a strong democracy, for building an egalitarian, prosperous nation, for building an indivisible and indissoluble sovereign state under God, then definitely, Mr. President, we don't have a choice but to allocate more funds to education. Mr. President, as it is today, we have the unenviable record of the largest number of out-of-school children in the sub-region. Mr. President, because of the instability in our educational system, we still have the largest in the sub-region of cross-border students. And so, Mr. President, I think that we need some more funding to soar up and salvage our educational sector. Mr. President, without sounding like a broken record, in 2020, we talked about the need to allocate more funds to works. Mr. President, if you fly our roads today, many of them are in states of serious disrepair. And I want to at least draw our attention to this situation in my constituency, Mr. President. The dualization of the Otukpo Link Road was actually flagged up in December
2018. But Mr. President, as I'm talking to you today, the road has been left in a serious state of comatose. And quite frankly, it is impossible and literally translating to a death trap. Just about 8 kilometers.
Time up.
Just like about 8 kilometers. Mr. President, the Tarakwa Alede Road also presents a very pitiable sight. Yet, these are roads whose contracts have been awarded. The point I'm trying to make, Mr. President, is that the Ministry of Work that is saddled with this responsibility, Mr. President, is begging for serious funds. One, to offset the debt owed contractors who have already done works. And two, to have enough funds to be able to at least embark on new roads. Mr. President, I think this is very, very important because the Ministry of Works and its infrastructural development presents a very veritable platform for achieving two results.
Senator Maro, time up. You can round up now, please. You need to round up so that we can take another next person. Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, I think we need to keep to the time. We have about 26 to 30 more senators to speak. So if we keep on talking out of time, I think we'll be here for a very long time. So I would urge that we keep to our 3 minutes. And if we must go beyond 3 minutes, let it be 3.5 minutes. Senator Matthew Uragide.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Senator Matthew Urogide. I represent the good people of Edo South Senatorial District in Edo State. Mr. President, before I just quickly make my comments, I want to lend my voice to what our very amiable Deputy Senate President just mentioned, that we are appealing to the good conscience of the leadership of this country, that the road that leads from Benin to our Warri and the road that leads from Benin to Abraka, they need urgent attention. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, my very humble contribution will be first in the area of budget deficit. Mr. President, this has become an issue that all of us, and indeed this country, must concern itself with. The deficit that we are getting as a difference of our aggregate expenditure, our aggregate revenue, and of course expenditure, is still too huge. That is the reason why we are doing borrowings these days. And people have tried to justify this borrowing in respect to debt to GDP. We know it too, that because of certain pressures, COVID-19 and other pressures in Nigeria and indeed the whole world, that our GDP is expected to dip by about 6.7%. Therefore, we expect that our borrowings too should go down. Again, the issue of revenue, the more we have, the less the deficit. Therefore, our oil production, our exchange rates, and then revenue-bearing agencies, we must put emphasis on them. The pressure of borrowing is too much on this country. Mr. President, I want to quickly go to the issue of ZIP. Every year, 100 billion is being earmarked for ZIP, for the 6 geopolitical zones. That is where every legislator in the National Assembly has the opportunity of executing one project or the other that is localized in areas. And if you look at the percentage of 100 billion, Mr. President, to a total aggregate of 13.08 trillion is about 0.03%. And if you compare that again to our own projected capital expenditure of 3.6 trillion, that again is about 0.06%. And to think of it, that this is the one that is being funded with 50% or to 70%, I think it should be given at least the attention it deserves. 100% should be the minimum that our ZIP execution should be in this year's budget. Mr. President, the other special intervention projects that have been put in there, recently the COVID-19 intervention projects. I want to say that the greater majority of the release of the people never got the benefit of it. And I don't believe in this year, please let us look at it with a whole lot of responsibility. Then, finally, Mr. President, I want to talk about the issue of service-wide vote. Mr. President, there is something that we have not been glossing over when it comes to releases from service-wide vote. Service-wide vote is a pool of money that is budgeted to meet up with shortfalls in recurrent and capital expenditure. Mr. President, in public accounts, we have been able to find out that disbursement to meet shortfalls for recurrent and capital fund service-wide votes, even the standing committees that come to, that get a budget difference, and then of course even budget performance reports, they do not often know what is released to their agencies from service-wide votes. It's only the Accountant General that can always give us figures that are released from service-wide votes. And I believe the Senate now has to compare the office of the Accountant General and the Minister of Finance, that every year what is released from service-wide votes must be made available to the standing committees, in addition to budgetary allocations that are made to them. This is very important, because service-wide votes, what is voted every year, is no small money, no small amount, but its defense and then of course its audit is always in secrecy. We have made several attempts calling agencies of government that apart from budgetary allocation made for you in a year, what you were given as, because you complained to Mr. President or to the executive, they gave you an additional amount of money to meet certain reasons or certain obligations. How did you use the money? It takes us time to start writing to banks or try writing to find out where the money was lodged and what the money was used for. So this assembly has really never bothered about releasing from service-wide vote and their utilization. This is the time to ask for it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Adiola Solomon Olamilekon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Adiola Solomon Olamilekon, representing Lagos West Senatorial District of Lagos State. Mr. President, let me start by commending the National Assembly for returning the country financial year within the 12th calendar month of January to December. Secondly, let me equally thank Mr. President for buying into our agenda of returning the nation's financial year to January to December. And thirdly, let me also commend and thank all my colleagues that have spoken regarding the 13.08 trillion budget that was presented to the National Assembly by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Mr. President, my own contribution will be to allay some of the fears of my colleague in some very sensitive areas that have been raised based on the 13.08 trillion budget that was presented before the National Assembly. Mr. President, you are aware, and the Senate is aware, that the budget process itself starts with the Committee on Finance, that is the medium-term expenditure framework and the fiscal strategy paper. And all the parameters upon which this budget was predicated upon was passed by the Senate before the eventual presentation of the budget to the National Assembly. Mr. President, number one, on the issue of borrowing, I have listened with rapt attention to all of my colleagues who have tried to raise issues concerning the rate of borrowing, the GDP of debt service to borrowing, and so many other parameters that borders on
Chairman of Finance.
Sir?
Because you are Chairman of Finance, I'm giving you additional 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. That has been raised on all other parameters as far as borrowing is concerned. My dear colleague, I want to assure you that yes, the threshold must have been exceeded by some points. And for whatever you have seen in terms of 0.64%, we are coming in by way of an amendment through the Finance Act bill that will be presented in the next couple of weeks, where the threshold will be corrected. But sir, distinguished colleagues, this threshold we have exceeded as a nation is not peculiar to Nigeria alone. Every countries of the world have exceeded this threshold as a result of the pandemic. A lot of business activities globally has gone into a state of coma. And the only way that every nation's economy can be driven or be supported is through effective borrowing. Nigeria as a nation, during the pandemic, when it was very serious, I want to thank the government for the minute fee to contribute or be one of the members nation contributing to the IMF funds. To the tune of our own contribution of 3.4 billion, we were allowed to draw down. And all of this encouraged our budget performances during the pandemic. If we have not been a contributor, if we have not been part and parcel of the global economy, maybe we'll be singing a different ball game. I agree with you that borrowing might be too much, but what we should be our emphasis is the judicious application of this fund that is borrowed, which I know the present government of the day is doing that effectively. And I want us to please let the focus, let our energy be directed towards, is this fund borrowed by the government, is it judiciously applied? Is it used for the purpose in which it was borrowed for? I think if we can ask all these questions and verify all this documentation, our fears will be allayed. One of my colleagues stood up here and said, some of the legacy projects of this administration, which include the second Niger Bridge, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the East-West Road, the Kaduna-Abuja Road, and the Mambila Power Project, has been financed by the National Sovereign Investment Authority. I disagree, because that is not the true position. The true position is, as of today, the funding of those legacy projects are from the coffers of the federal government. No doubt about it, that down the line, the NSIA will also get some counterpart funding. But it was agreed that the federal government will produce some funding, while some also will be produced by the NSIA. So as it is today, all these legacy projects are funding are being done solely by the federal government. That is their own contribution, part of the deal. Distinguished colleague, you will quite agree with me that everybody wants one development or the other to come to their areas. Roads have been mentioned, electricity and all other areas. But you quite agree with me that all of this cannot be achieved if there is no revenue. And as it is today, there are a lot of issues, a lot of things that have been put before this Senate which we need to consider, which we need to work upon to show up the revenue generation of the federal government. As we speak today, whatever comes into the coffers of the government or whatever is being contributed either from the GOEs or any revenue generating of the government is not enough either fund the budget or even support the budget. So I'm using this opportunity again to call on all our colleagues that we need to do more in this regard and work from day one. As soon as we have gotten this budget now, we have a budget of 13.08 trillion, and that is the budget estimate. But we need to produce a corresponding 13.08 trillion funding to fund that budget 100%. And the way the present financial structure is being, the only retained revenue portion of this 13.08 is 7.8 trillion, while 4.28 trillion is coming from borrowing, and the remaining balance is coming from privatization of some of the government-owned agencies. So all of these are the financial structure which we are going to use to attain or achieve the funding of the 13.08 trillion. So we have a lot to do, and we have to work tirelessly to ensure that we produce and have adequate revenue to make sure that we have to fund the 13.08 trillion of the federal government. My dear colleague, another areas which will be of concern and interest to us as a Senate is the area of the cost of governance. We have stand up here that the budget structure as it currently were is 70% cost of running the government, while 30% cost of providing infrastructure and all other things. This is one area that we as a National Assembly have to start looking into to see how we bring down this cost of running the government, either from that 70 to 60, so that what we go into provision of infrastructure and all other things that will assist in the development will be raised to about 40 to 45%. That should be the trend. And that is how we start to look at those agencies of the government that exist and are not contributing anything to the nation's treasury. As we currently have, we have 3 levels of agencies of the government. We have those that are fully funded by the budget, those that are partly funded, those that are not funded at all. And that is why, once again, I will use this medium to call on the federal government to revisit the Orosoye panel report. The Orosoye panel report has suggested to us the total number of agencies that we should have that will be effective for the running of the day-to-day affairs of this country. That panel report has suggested 106 agencies of the government. Even if there's going to be modifications or we need to do anything to it, we should visit that report first and let's see their recommendation. Let's look at how they came about this 106 out of the over 600 agencies of the government which we currently have. And these are ways and means by which we start looking into how we reduce the cost of running the government, which currently, as we speak today, is at 72%. And 28% cost of providing infrastructure and every other thing as the budget we currently have before us. I think that should be of interest to us as a nation. Another area which I want to commend the government for is the area of the exchange rates. Many of my colleagues have tried as much as possible to raise issues concerning the current exchange rate of what has been given in the budget. The government have been magnanimous enough. The MTF initially laid before us was at $360 naira to $1. And we can maintain 2 exchange rates, that is the 360 and the 380, which we currently have, and the third one, which is the parallel market of about 400 and something. But because this government is sincere and they are trying to show their commitment towards nation building, they have to merge the 2 rates, that is the 360 and 380, to have one rate of 379. And that is why today we only have one rate competing with that of the parallel market. And that is the only way we can use, but that we can use to bring down the current rate that is currently operating in the parallel market, which I believe is not too good for us and it's not helping our economy. Also, Mr. President, I want my colleague also to know that this government is doing so much in the area of trying to provide infrastructure. As I've said it in my earlier submission, everybody wants roads, everybody wants lights, everybody wants every good things to his own senatorial district, to his own local government, to everywhere. But the resources to provide all these things is very, very scarce. It's very, very scarce. And that is why we have to walk within the tightrope of what is available to us as a nation. And Mr. President, it is high time we start paying a lip service concerning the diversification of this economy. We have continually, every year in, year out, every month, every day, talked about diversification of the Nigerian economy. As we currently have, I strongly believe we have a monolithic economy. Monolithic in the sense that the only veritable source of foreign income into Nigeria today is oil. And you and I agree that immediately, there is a small challenge with the oil prices. Everything went standstill. There is no foreign earnings coming into us as a nation. Nigeria started running helter-skelter, all for us to be able to stand and continue to exist as a nation. And that is why the issue of diversification of this economy should not be a lip service any longer. Nigeria needs another very veritable and very strong sources of revenue into this nation aside oil.
Chairman, you can start to...
Yeah, aside oil. And I want us as a Senate to use this as an opportunity to start looking into critical sector, as mentioned by some of my colleagues, the mining sector and all other sectors that can bring us veritable source of foreign income into this nation. I think if all of this put together is put in place, we can start having a budget that will not only be of economic recovery, but also be supporting whatever our yearnings and our agendas are. And don't forget, this government has put together a 2.31 trillion economic recovery plan, out of which 500 billion has been presented before us, which has been approved in 2020 budgets. They still have additional 1.8 trillion still outstanding, so that to serve as a shock for this economy. But we still need us as a people and as a representative of the people to work so hard to ensure that we support this government, not only with the budget, but in every facet of it, to ensure that all the dreams and our aspirations as a country can come to pass. I so submit, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Senator Suleiman Kwame. Chairman, Finance, please, can you switch off your mic?
I am Suleiman Abdul Kwari, representing Kaduna North. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I join other distinguished senators in thanking leadership for the progress we have made at ensuring the budget cycle is maintained. Mr. President, the current budget, tagged budget of sustaining growth and job creation, was hampered or has been hampered seriously because of the low returns on revenue. The total revenue projected has been short by so much that instead of creating jobs and also ensuring the important and necessary infrastructures are put in place, we now have a situation where we are being faced with dwindling revenues, and that necessitated a review of the current budget and a further review of the price of oil forecast at $28 per barrel, but which is now hovering over $40, thanks to the improvement in those prices. Mr. President, whenever you are being faced with revenue challenge, you have only two choices. One, to look at your expenses or expenditure and reduce them, or you also look at the cost of doing business. And in this case, I think we should seriously be looking at the recurrent expenditure that forms part of the total budget for the coming year. Personnel costs at over 33% as projected is really way too high. Best practice requires us to ensure that a budget on personnel should at all times be lower than 25% because that is the international best practice. So we should also be looking at the overhead, which is high by all aspects. So this, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I believe will help in actualizing our projections. We note also that the capital aspect of the budget for the current year at over 50% releases is a plus for the government, and this should be applauded. That is not enough to say that areas of improvement in the areas of health, education, and especially agri that we seek to diversify so much should not be looked at. And once this is done and encouraged, it will go a long way in ensuring that the necessary revenues from such diversification, especially solid minerals and other sectors that have been neglected in the past, also contribute its own quota to bringing in the necessary revenues that the government so desperately desires to have. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I also want to note the milestones recorded in railway network by way of improving the railway network in the country, the second Niger bridge that has been under construction, and also to applaud the Amco Borrower Scheme that is under the Ministry of Finance and also CBN. I also want to commend the infrastructural investment company that is being proposed, because this, Mr. President, will unleash the resources, idle resources that abound within the pension fund, the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority Fund, and all this will be brought to ensure that the necessary funding required is brought within the budget. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I would want to also recommend that the economic enhancement and competitiveness be extended to the area of NNPC, as I have said. NNPC's business is not being competitive, and it is desired that the cost of production of our oil per barrel should be brought to $9 per barrel. I so submit, distinguished, yes, $9 per barrel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Sumata Demi.
Mr. President, I rise to pass some few remarks about the budget presentation of Mr. President. In doing that, Mr. President, I will deviate from what quite a number of my colleagues have said in their contributions. But I will try as much as I can, Mr. President, to be specific, not on the figures that we have been presented with, but I'll be looking at some of the silent policy of this government that are embedded in the presentation of the budget. And I want to thank, first and foremost, the President, President Muhammadu Buhari, and I want to commend him for taking the construction of infrastructural facilities with all the seriousness it deserves. Particularly, Mr. President, the proposed construction of Obajana-Kaba-Ilorin Road, which links Kwara and Kogi to the southwest, is highly commendable. That project was awarded when we were in that party, and somehow it was not done. But I want to commend this progressive government of President Muhammadu Buhari for giving Kaba-Ilorin Road with all the seriousness that it deserves. Having said this, Mr. President, I also want to say that there are areas of interest to me. Those are the areas that affect the well-being of the common people. And like you know, we have been in this struggle for some time now. And this struggle is our life. The struggle of making sure that an average Nigerian could be gainfully employed and have 3 square meals. The proposed 100 billion being set aside for household and small-scale industries or businesses is highly commendable. This budget is a budget anticipating, of course, the global economic recession. And no one should deceive the other person that the economy outlook for next year will be very bright. Well, that's left to Almighty God. But we look at the figures and the projections, especially the mainstay of our economy, oil, then you understand why this budget takes the format it's taking. A lot has been said about borrowing, Mr. President. Well, I hold the view, Mr. President, that there's nothing bad in borrowing as long as the money will be spent well for the well-being of the nation and the people, as long as we borrow to improve infrastructural facilities, there's nothing bad in borrowing. And I'm sure, Mr. President, without being partisan, some of the gigantic projects of this administration takes a lot of courage and sincerity of purpose. The rail line that has been constructed across this country is fundamental to the socio-economic development of our nation. And I want to support the proposal, the budget, towards infrastructure facilities, building road network, rail lines. These are key. These are things we ought to have done some 10, 15 years ago when oil was selling at $150 per barrel, $140 per barrel. And I'm surprised that even as at that time, that government was still borrowing money. But what do we have to show for the money that your government has borrowed? You people there, we can't really account for those money. So for me, I think this government is more progressive and the borrowing of money is yielding results. I'm not saying we should mortgage our future to the Chinese, but I'm saying that when we borrow money, we must see the impact of it in the standard and the numbers of infrastructure facilities that have been constructed. This is, to me, gladdens my heart. Looking at rail that will link from Port Harcourt to Maiduguri, from Lagos to Calabar, these are highly commendable projects. Mr. President, I'm equally happy with the 1 trillion naira being set aside for large-scale agriculture and manufacturing industry. At 5%, to me, we should not look at the figure. We should look at the silence policy that's being attached to this budget. The question will be that, will this be implemented? I think so, and I hope so. That all the policies that have been embedded with the budget, which will help to galvanize the economic activities of our people. Once the small-scale industries are functioning, then there is less impact of the economic recession because people will still retain their jobs. Because if there are no jobs, there is not talk about security of life and property. So if the small-scale industries are given the 5%, and I hope the money be set aside will not be diverted, especially by the banks, because one of the greatest problems confronting Nigeria today is the banking industry, where they will make life very difficult for people to have access to facilities. So I think we should look at that aspect. As long as facilities are made available for people to run small-scale industries. Most of our youth today who are going around demonstrating, it's because they have no job. If we make facility and money available for them and they can set up small-scale industry, most of those boys will not be on the street. So this money that has been set aside for agriculture, 1 trillion naira, another 100 billion naira for household and small-scale industries. We hope, Mr. President.
Chief Whip.
No, you call Chief Whip. We should look at the implementation, Mr. President. We should look at the implementation of the silent policy that is embedded in this budget. That to me is more than the figure. Now, Mr. President, I will say this. There's one key sector that I think we should take note of. And the money available for it, to me, needs to be reviewed. And that is iron and steel. We have iron and steel in local jar that...
Distinguished time out. Try to round up, please.
This is very key. This affects the common people. Now, if we can allow iron and steel complex to function, Mr. President, about 20,000 people will be employed by iron and steel complex in Ajakuta. If we make money available, that will be another main source of foreign revenue earnings. Because even within the African continent, they will buy our product. Mr. President, I so submit.
Thank you very much. Senator Francis Alimakena, Oroto.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Francis Alimakena, representing Edo North. Mr. President, I rise to support the second reading of this year's budget. I agree with the principle of this budget, that is budget of recovery. With the benchmark of $40 per barrel, I believe it will be realizable in view of the global trend in the oil market. I also agree with the lead debate of yesterday, who adduced the benefits of borrowing. It is good to borrow, Mr. President, but I caution that we should not borrow all the time, because it's easy to borrow but difficult to pay back. If we are to borrow to move forward, why not? We must borrow. So we feel that we must move forward. Mr. President, the theme of this year's budget is economic recovery. If this is so, Mr. President, Okene to Auchi to Ekoma, Auchi to Akenibode Roads need urgent recovery. Year in, year out, we'll be seeing this in the budget. We hope that this year, since it is economic recovery, as we were said by the President, that there will not going to be new projects, the other outstanding projects that are outstanding should be completed. It should be recovered. This is true. And I praise the President, the President government for what they are doing. Mr. President, we need to look at our revenue drive. The fiscal policy on revenue drive should be straightened so that the loopholes will be plugged. And when we do that, there will be no need for borrowing, because we have the resources that can even sustain this country. And if we put our eyes in order, so that some of this fiscal policy on revenue drive should be strengthened, and when it is strengthened, there's no need for us to go hand cap in hand in foreign loans. So I shall move, Mr. President.
Senator Olubunmi Adetunbi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, Olubunmi Adetunbi representing Ekiti North. Mr. President, we are discussing the general principles of this budget, and I'm going to speak to a very, very important and strategic issue. Last week, Mr. President, the executive legislative parley that took place at the presidential villa dwelled largely on the issue of budget process. And a lot of speakers at that forum talked about many things that need to be looked at. There are 5 areas requiring reform in our budget process, two of which this 9th Assembly has done very well. The first is a timely submission, debate, and passage of the budget before the preceding year to the budget.
We are doing that for 2 consecutive budgets now, and I think this is kudos to the 9th Assembly. The issue of revenue mobilization has featured very, very prominently in the preparation for next year's budget as presented in a report by Planning and Finance Committee recently. But Mr. President, there are 3 areas where this budget process still has weaknesses that we need to look at. One is in the quality and the content of the budget and how much our budget provides development impact to the country. Second, the macroeconomic stability and all the issues of MTEF and pre-budget projections are areas where more work will need to be done in future budgets, Mr. President. Finally, in the area of fiscal and monetary policy coordination, whereby there is serious alignment between what the executive side of government is doing and what the Central Bank of Nigeria is doing in the area of interventions. Mr. President, my observation of our budget process and the role of the National Assembly is going to be predicated on making planning, national planning, medium-term development plan to be the bedrock of budget process. It will appear to me that the culture of budgeting at the national level is built around allocation of resources that have been mobilized by the federal government into the federation account and indeed into the federal government share of the federation account. But there is no consensus on what constitutes the development vision for the nation for any particular year and the role that budgeting will play in that. The debate in this floor all morning has been based on this project ought to be given priority, that project ought not to be given priority, and there has been back and forth between different speakers in this current debate. Why is that so? The reason is that we are building consensus at the wrong place and at the wrong time. Usually, consensus building in the process of allocation of resources is very difficult if there is no foundational agreement on vision and plan. And that is an area where I think this ninth Senate must champion a reform in the budget process that makes discussion on economic planning and prioritization of projects the first place of meeting of minds between the executive and the parliament, so that by the time we come to numbers, the numbers will be reflecting the decisions that have been taken collectively between all the arms of government. After all, we are one government, according to popular opinion. MTEF is not supposed to be the starting point of budget discussion. The starting point of budget discussion should be what is the development plan of the country for year 2021 and what constitute national priorities. That is when projects are determined before allocation of resources are done. As we are As we are arguing on allocation of resources, and that should not be so. Finally, Mr. President, there is no reason why the membership of the National Economic Council should exclude Parliament. The head of chambers, at least in the minimum, should be seated around the table for National Economic Council meetings. If we have the power of the purse and we pass the budget, the fiscal policy of government is dependent on the activities of this chamber, then the foundational discussion on economic management priorities of this country should be inclusive of the National Assembly. Mr. President, I conclude my contribution.
Thank you very much. Senator Danjumala.
Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. I am Senator Danjuma, represent Kaduna South. I stand here to support all those that have contributed so far on this budget. As I usually said, the contribution or the budget projected for the year was such a huge amount that I felt which was not very necessary. And of course, all the discussion we talk, anything we say about this budget, we are only saying it because we don't have the headings that will give us the facilities to understand what the budget is all about. And of course, whatever we are doing here, we are doing it because of you, Senate President, to give you that respect, to cover anything that we are doing here to allow the sleeping dog lives. As a matter of fact, the budget, we have some shortcomings. All the discussion about the MTEL was supposed to be broad, to sit down and know the headings, just like the other past speaker have said, so that we can know which one are we up to, what are we supposed to support, and what are we not supposed to do. And I will say this thing, all this issue of transportation in regard of the railway network, I understand my senatorial district was completely left behind. I was not taken into consideration. And you should know that my senatorial zone was the first among all to be used as this railway station in Kafanchan, whereby all those people passing to the northeast where you are coming from, everybody must pass through Kafanchan. But this time around, it has been forgotten. And I don't know how they are going to pass with this road from Port Harcourt to east. They must go through Kafanchan, whether they like it or not. And if you think you want to pass to another place, then we'll bring some Boko Haram for you people. This is our own, because Southern Kaduna is the north central area that we are expecting. Almost all roads within that area should be given due attention. If you understand the roads are not getting there, we don't have infrastructure consigned on the area completely. I don't just know what is the problem. And I'm bringing it before this humble chamber to look into my request. I said it before the Minister of Transport and Work, to make him understand that our issue in my senatorial district is to make sure that we go along with everybody. The government of the day have done their best. More especially, they've touched where I was so concerned about the employment of this interior army and other, because they did the best that I think graduates, major graduates that completed their school have nothing doing. They are just sitting doing nothing. By that fact, giving all this employment to these ministries, like the Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Power, Police Affairs, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Health, this give us concern.
Time up.
All these people are able to be given employment. In fact, this situation in the country will be reduced to the barest minimum. There will be no killings. Boko Haram will reduce to the barest minimum, and even these terrorists will find nowhere to capture or to kidnap. At this point, I also request that the federal government should look into more or less on the this revenue generation, how they are generating their revenue. I said it the other time that they must increase task force on how to follow up the collection of revenue to make sure that it is well handled. The revenue in this country is being misused. We have a lot of things that can grant more revenue for us, but it is not well handled, in that many people are misusing the money that we are generating in this country. That's why you see we are having this problem of borrowing today, tomorrow borrow, and all that stuff. If the revenue is well handled, we cannot go into borrowing. And for this, I beg to say that you have been doing good. We'll continue to support you, but we'll look into what we need to be done at all costs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me remark at this stage that when we receive something like this, the budget or indeed any other thing from the executive, what is expected of us as a parliament is to look into what is requested, give it the kind of scrutiny that is necessary, If there is need to improve on what is submitted, we do so, because that will be in the best interest of everyone, including the executive arm of government. We shouldn't just give them back if we feel something needs to be corrected to make it better, and maybe if it is a policy, make it a more efficient, operable, and effective policy. So we don't have to just oblige anything or everything if we think we need to do some work on the requests. But I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Senator Binozia Radoda.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I'm Binos Dauda Yaro, Adama South. Mr. President, I would like to start by acknowledging the very, very articulate defense of the budget that my distinguished senior professional colleague, the Chairman of Finance, presented here. It is as if we shouldn't debate this budget further. But Mr. President, we must express our concerns on the budget. And for me, my major concern is the level of deficit. Not just because the deficit in the proposed budget of 2021 is unprecedented, but if you go back 4 or 5 years, you'll see that every year we are preparing a budget of deficit, and every year the budgeted deficit, the actual deficit, exceeds the budgeted deficit. If I just give you a few figures, in 2017, the budgeted deficit was 2.4 trillion, but the actual deficit was 4 trillion. In 2018, the budgeted deficit was 2 trillion. The actual deficit was around 3.8 trillion. In 2019, the budgeted deficit was 1.9 trillion. The actual deficit was 4 trillion. This year, 2020, the budgeted deficit was 5 trillion. It is your guess, in the context and the environment of COVID-19 and the drop in oil prices, what the actual deficit is going to be for 2020. Therefore, it is of great concern. That is why we have been piling debt. And as long as we continue preparing our budget, starting from expenditure, before looking at revenue, and then balancing the shortfall of revenue with borrowing, the borrowing level will continue to grow. Mr. President, if we even just look at the expenditure, 13 trillion, revenue is 60% of the total expenditure. Deficit is 40% of the total expenditure. Debt service is 25% of the total expenditure. Mr. President, these figures are worrisome. So unless we really go back and look at the budget and see how we can cut down on our expenditure to be able to fund our expenditure from our revenue, we are mortgaging the future of our children and our children's children. So, Mr. President, many people have talked about infrastructure.
Time up.
And I definitely have to also talk about the problem of roads in my zone. And I must tell you here that already there are youths in Adama and Taraba that have created social media hashtag handles in which they are saying, fix Yola on the road and fix Numan Jalingo Road. Mr. President, the problem we have is that the resources of this country, when we deploy them, we don't do so fairly and equitably across the country. We must address that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Kola Balogun.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Kola Balogun. I represent Oyo South Senatorial District. Mr. President, there is a question that has been asked from me, especially by our friends in the media. Every time my path crosses their path, they will ask me, what do you consider to be the greatest achievement of the next Senate? My response has always been that it is our collective determination to return the country back to January-December budgetary cycle under your leadership. Mr. President, we have to appreciate you for these efforts. Let me also commend President Muhammad Buhari for the fact that we are now having a second budget proposal being debated. And Mr. President has submitted, has presented the budget to the National Assembly on record time. So we must also commend Mr. President for doing so. When I look at the 2021 budget proposal, I have noticed in it a 65% increase on capital spending on education. For me, this is an appreciable increase. We shouldn't do less than that. Education is a necessary tool that we need to manipulate the manpower platform for national development. Education is the real safeguard of democracy. Education is a powerful tool of geopolitical stability. Therefore, any investment in that direction, for me, is commendable. Healthcare delivery services. I've also noticed an improvement. I've also noticed an increase in our allocation in the healthcare sector. The lesson of coronavirus pandemic has made this increase an imperative. Now we can have some money to fund our tertiary and primary healthcare platform. Mr. President.
Leader.
Point of order. Point of order, Mr. President. I raise point of order 13, that this distinguished chamber suspend its order 13 so that we'll be able to continue our deliberations beyond the appointed time. I so move.
Who is the appointed minority leader? Please, we need someone. Or we can volunteer from the other side. Okay, Senator Hassan Gusau.
Mr. President, I dare second.
Introduce yourself now. No, you don't have to come down, but eventually you will.
Mr. President, I dare second. Let's move.
Thinking you will say acting leader, acting minority leader. So you can take the seat. Well, distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate suspends is order 13 to enable a seat beyond 2 o'clock, say aye. Those against say nay, the ayes have it. Senator, you have finished your contribution. Okay, round up, please.
1 more minute.
Mr. President, so with this increase in allocation to health sector, it is my hope that we'll be able to have some funds to improve on our tertiary and primary healthcare delivery system. Mr. President, I've also observed that 198 billion is allocated to power sector. This, I believe, is targeted at the ongoing rural electrification project. Mr. President, when I sit back here, every time when we discuss the need to revitalize our moribund paper mill or textile industries, I giggle. I do so because unless and until we fix the power sector, there is no way we can bring back our moribund industries. And if we do so, and the power sector is fixed, of course we'll be able to diversify the economy. We can expand the economy, and then we can create jobs for our youth. Mr. President, I appreciate all the efforts and support you've been given to the Power Committee. And I hope in the year to come, we will continue to pay attention to the power sector. Mr. President.
You have to round up, please distinguish. Yes.
13.8 trillion budget, out of which 5.49 trillion deficit will be financed by new borrowings. Mr. President, this is dreadful. And I say this with all sense of responsibility. When your budget is balanced, when your budget is not balanced, you run the risk of a rise in national debt. And when the national debt is high, there's no way you can expand the economy.
Distinguished, you have to round up now, please.
Time up.
Distinguished Balogun, please round up.
A deficit budget. So, Mr. President, we have to do the needful to ensure that we grow the economy, we expand the economy, and ensure that let's use our oversight function to ensure that we have more revenues so that our country will not become a debtor nation forever. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Distinguished Senator Nicholas Tofomo.
Mr. Senate President, Senator Nicholas Tofomo representing Ondo South. Recurrent expenditure of Ministry of Defense is 840 billion and capital expenditure is 121 billion, which I see to be too high when Ministry of Health recurrent expenditure is 380 billion and capital expenditure is 131 billion. COVID-19 exposed our health sector to be crawling in the field of development. I thought 2021 budget would have rectified this anomaly, which it hasn't. If you look at Nigeria Police capital expenditure is 13.5 billion, which I see to be inadequate because policing is undeveloping when we compare Great Britain and other developed countries. Most police stations and mobilities are in derelict state. Crime rate is increasing and we need to inject meaningful funds to upgrade our policing. The IG would agree with me that Nigeria Police is regularly underfunded, and we need aggressive rehabilitation to upgrade our policing. Our budget is 13 trillion, and 4 trillion will be service debt out of 13 trillion. It means that 9 trillion is the actual fund available to run our economy in 2021. I would suggest we manage our borrowing properly so that we don't burn our fingers economically. If you look at the east-west rail from Lagos through Ore to Benin, leading to Onitsha and Aba, and ending up in Calabar, this will eradicate heavy trailer congestion on our roads from Lagos to the eastern part of Nigeria and assist the congestion in Lagos Seaport. The 256 billion voted for transport cannot install east to west rail alone, which is an indication that east-west rail is just a dream. The budget is a proposal presently, so I will advise we screen it properly and reduce wastage where necessary. Thank you, Mr. Senate President.
Distinguished Senator Sadiq Omar Suleiman.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleague, I am Sadiq Suleiman Umar. I represent the good and decent people of Kwara North. Mr. President, let me first thank Mr. President and the Executive generally for helping us to keep to our promise and our night legislative agenda, which is that we want to return the budget cycle to January to December as predictable. They did it last year, and they have done it this year again. And by the grace of God, we on our own part will make sure we pass this budget before the end of December. Mr. President, the 2020 budget was a budget of sustaining growth and job creation. Unfortunately, with the coronavirus pandemic, there has been so much adjustment that we could not deliver the required jobs. But with hard work and adjustment, the pandemic has been brought under control in Nigeria, and the negative economic impact of our people has been reduced by this government. We commend the government for that good job. Now it is time to recover and build a resilient economy. And I'm happy that this budget is equally so themed so that we can continue from economic growth and job creation that we've not been able to deliver in the last year. It is instructive, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, to see that this year's budget has moved the capital project to 29%, an improvement over last year and indeed several other years back. And I hope that we'll continue this gradual improvement till we get to where we should be with our capital. The revenue performance, Mr. President, too, has improved to about 60%. However, much needs to be done here. And the role will be back to National Assembly, where we pay attention to our oversight functions, especially on government-owned enterprises. I know we've already started that, and that will be a major source of financing for this budget. Mr. President, my legislative interest is in 4 key areas: women and youth empowerment, infrastructure, education, and health. And I'm happy that Mr. President has copiously spoke of all the areas that this youth and women empowerment via various social interventions, palliatives that have been catered for in this budget. But most importantly, Mr. President, on paragraph 39, The President in his speech said, to bridge the infrastructure deficit, we are also implementing innovative financing strategies to pull in private sector investment. This is the only way to go. And I'm happy about this, and we look forward to seeing this follow through so that we are able to cover our infrastructural deficit. Secondly, my major passion, health. On paragraph 65, the President did mention that the 157% increase in the capital allocation to the health sector is to enhance the capacity to deliver healthcare services through the procurement of equipment, vaccines, and other facilities. He went on paragraph 66 too, to say that numerous primary healthcare centers will be equipped and upgraded across the geopolitical zone, in addition to other ancillary additions. This is good news for me. And lastly, Mr. President,
Time up.
Education, the Ministry of Education capital allocation has been increased by 65%. But lastly, Mr. President, my senatorial district is one of those districts left behind infrastructurally. All the roads, Saragi to Patigi, Kanji to Kayama to Kishi, Elisha to Chikanda, they are always in the budget, but they are not funded. I urge us all to ensure that we support the funding of these roads in this budget. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Senator Aleko Mustafa.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I rise to support the second reading of the 2021 budget with a few remarks. The first thing I want to talk about is borrowing. I am not completely against government borrowing money to provide infrastructures, but then we need to prioritize areas of our borrowing. For example, I don't see any reason why we need to borrow money to do railways, because globally there are investors who are dying to come to Nigeria to invest, particularly because of the very huge population that we have. And we know that railway is a form of transportation. A very simple example that we have very close to us is the one that operates between Abuja and Kaduna. If you want to go to Kaduna from Abuja, if care is not taken, if you don't buy your ticket about 2-3 days before the trip, you will not be able to get a ticket to buy. There are people, there are companies, there are investors who want to come to Nigeria to invest in railways, to invest in marine transportation. Rather, the money that we borrow, I believe, should be channeled towards the provision of critical infrastructure. If we look at the whole country as of today, the number of roads that are passable will probably not be more than 10% of the roads that we have in the country. So from here, going through Niger State to the south, there's no way you can drive to Ilorin in 5-6 hours. The minimum time you require to go to Ilorin from this place, passing through Niger State, you will need about 15 hours to get there. Those are areas that I think we could borrow money to put proper infrastructure in place. Another area I want to talk about is energy, or maybe power, so to say. Our power sector needs greater scrutiny and attention. There are lots of question marks on the integrity and capacity of some of those that manage the successor companies in the power sector today. Some of these owners are alleged to be the same people who managed the failed banks of the past. And if we look very closely to the issues, we realize that at the end, the end to the chaos in the power sector is not yet in sight. Even Mr. President, even the most optimistic of the stakeholders in the power sector cannot define a clear roadmap how the crisis and chaos in the power sector can be eliminated as we speak. This ought not to be. This budget should be one that will stop the dancing naked in the marketplace by the power sector players. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I believe that we are all unanimous in embracing the concept of PPP in the country. But unfortunately, the government is yet to provide any solid platform in place to ensure the success of PPP model. Rather, the government continues to strain itself by looking for money to borrow all over the place. Whereas most of the areas that they want to spend these funds can be done through PPP. We should help the executive to probably formulate a way or a policy that will establish a proper PPP arrangement in the country. And lastly, Mr. President, the president, when presenting the budget, indirectly threw a challenge at we, the legislators. And that challenge is the fact that government will need to really monitor the revenue generation through their agencies. But monitoring all of this is more of the responsibility of the Assembly because of our oversight responsibilities. If we do our oversights very well, we will be able to help government in controlling the level of pilfering and leakages in the revenue generation in the system. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Senator Asharu, Lola Asharu.
Mr. President, distinguished colleague, this is another year. It's another session to discuss budget. And we thank Mr. President for being very temptuous in bringing out the budget this year. And I'm very sure we will do the needful here and be able to pass the budget as we have promised. On assumptions of the budget, $40 per barrel, 379 naira per dollar, 3% growth, and inflation of 11.95%. These figures are very acceptable and very realistic. I'm very sure it is very, very likely that going by the year, we'll be able to do better than our assumptions. The economic climate world over is the economic climate world over is very encouraging, and I'm very sure we'll do more than $40 as we go by. And it's very likely too that our naira will be able to garner strength as we go by. The total revenue of 7.88 is very encouraging, and our oil revenue in particular of 2.0 trillion is quite encouraging, and the oil and all other indices. I'm quite impressed too by our expenditure projection of 13.08 trillion. Though this figure, in terms of when you nominate it in dollar, might not be better than what we had next year. But I think that is not my worry. My worry really is in area of infrastructure. And I'm quite impressed that for work and housing, we have a bigger chunk this year, almost 400 billion. But that is not the problem really. The problem is always in delivery. We just passed through a budget cycle, and I look around, I cannot see much delivery. The projects that are going on, they have not been financed impressively. And I hope this time around, the ministry will take upon themselves to finish more roads and be able to deliver more houses.
our project management is so poor. And I feel that the graft level too, in most ministries and MDAs are not very encouraging. I will employ Mr. President to, as much as possible, impress it on ministries and MDAs that they should improve in project delivery. I want to talk about our rural community too. Especially, I'm much more concerned about those semi-urban areas who are non-agriculture in nature and they are non-industrials. I think that attention should be given to these communities. An example of my own community is a community, is a suburban area next to Ilorin in terms of population. But I'm sad to say that the security situation is so poor, the electricity generation and the electricity supply is so poor, and the roads are so bad, to the extent that my observation is that there is diminishing economic prosperity. And I wonder what will happen if we continue along this line in the next 5 years. Mr. President, thank you for allowing me this contribution.
Thank you very much. Senator Abraham Gobir.
Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, I want to state here that the federal government has done quite a lot that people should look at. Number one, we have to look at the issue of raising the non-oil revenue. If you look at it, the oil revenue stands at 2.1 trillion, while the non-oil revenue is 1.49 trillion. The difference is only 540 billion naira, which means with the effort of the federal government, by next year, certainly, I think we will be able to reach the non-oil revenue or even surpass it. So I think that is very commendable. Then secondly, the issue of lifting 100 million people from this budget out of poverty, I think is something that we have to look at and then also commend the government for that. But there is an issue that the federal government has to do. Federal government has to actually recruit coordinators in every state of the federation, because this is an APC program. But if you look at it, the PDP is taking over this one because they are taking the credit, most of the PDP states. So what I want is that the federal government should actually appoint coordinators so that those coordinators, so that the coordinators can also appoint sub-coordinators in the local governments, so that the government will actually know that this is their own program. It has nothing to do with the PDP, no matter what. I think it's important in that case. Then, secondly, we have to look at that issue of foreign exchange. The exchange is now 379. But when you compare last year, which was about 360, it means that the naira is devalued in this case. So I think in that case, the only way we can be able to pop up the naira is to increase industrialization, massive production of services, and then at the same time also try to diversify, go into agriculture and also solid minerals. I believe if we can do that, we can reduce the pressure on the naira. Then the other issue of borrowing, 4.8 trillion, I can understand, 4.28 trillion. Really, it's a burden. But of course, when you look at the issue, we will say, well, no country can actually avoid borrowing, no matter what the situation is. But of course, there is need to look at the quantum to our borrowing and that judicial utilization of that money, which is really very fundamental. Now, if you look at page 4.7, page 10, you will see that the issue of employment is curtailed. You know, agencies have been informed not to recruit until they contact the federal government. We don't want to actually have this problem, because if you continue with unemployment again for the next 4 years, that is going to create a lot of insecurity problem in this country. And that is something that we have to look at. Then the issue of fertilizer. Now, government is saying that they are subsidizing fertilizer. But what is happening now, the middlemen are now benefiting more than the masses. Because as I'm telling you now, it is very difficult to get fertilizer in the market at 5,000 naira. It's not possible. Then we also want to take this opportunity now to advise the federal government to equip the military, the DSS, the Air Force, and the police, so that we can be able to tackle the problem of banditry in the northwest and other areas of this country. So I think it's very important if we can properly finance them in this budget so that they can be able to do what we want them to do. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Senator Clifford Odia.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
But you see,
my name is Senator Clifford Odia. I represent Edo Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, let me begin by thanking Mr. President for submitting the budget to the National Assembly timeously. Mr. President, taking a look at the budget, parameter and physical assumptions used in the 2021 budget as presently presented by Mr. President appear realistic, especially when compared to the volatility in the world economic space. Mr. President, let me speak very clearly on the insecurity problems we have in Nigeria. We know very well that there is no country or nation that can develop economically if the level of security is not properly checked. That is why the time has come for Mr. President to take this very issue very seriously. Mr. President, the greater area of economic advantage in Nigeria has a lot to do with agriculture. You agree with me, Mr. President, and my dear colleagues, that the productivity ratio in this sector has been greatly declined, as again, Mr. President, as a result of insecurity. We must take security issue very seriously because it's affecting our productive capacity. And if we don't check it now, it's going to affect us very, very seriously. Mr. President, the road sector budget is grossly inadequate. We need to look at it again because most of our roads in the country are not passable. A case in point is actually the one from from Benin through Ekpoman, Auchi, Okene, and Lokoja. This road has been awarded for over 5 years now. It has to do with the dualization. Unfortunately, the funding is getting inadequate. We need to look at it. And I know that my colleagues from Edo State has also, made some remarks along this direction. Mr. President, one problem that we have with our nation building has a lot to do with the problems with the local contractors. Local contractors have borrowed money to execute projects for government. Up to now, some are being owed for an upward of 8-10 years. And this is not good enough. And we are looking at a project, a debt deficit of about 600 billion. I'm very much sure that if government is able to pay our local contractors, it will go a long way to reducing the rate of unemployment in this country. It will go a long way to reducing the rate of unemployment in this country. Mr. President, our unemployed youth is becoming a very major problem. We need to tackle unemployment of our youth very, very seriously at this point in time. Because you can see what is going on now. The level of agitation is becoming unbearable. Nigerians are suffering as a result of these riots here and there. I think we need to take action as quickly as possible for us to restore normalcy in this country. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Senator Michael Inachi.
Thank you, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Michael Inachi from Ebonyi South. Mr. President, the budget as proposed by Mr. President Buhari, for me, has created a paradigm shift from the old style
When I looked at that budget, I saw Youth Investment Fund. It's a very good idea. Not only that the youth can run election, the youth can also be millionaires. But there are certain areas that has caught my interest more. The amount allowed in works, for me, 404 billion should be looked into. Even though your speech last 3 minutes has taken position for us to do the needful. For instance, during the legislative executive retreat, I met with Minister of Works, particularly to talk about the road linking my own state from Abia State to Cross River. All he did was to lament over huge debts that the Ministry of Works are now owing indigenous contractors. And then at that period, I wondered if 404 billion can do anything in this budget after paying such huge amount of money as per that period, the certificate before him. So what I'm trying to signify is that, like the road in my place, backing from Abriba Junction, Ungu Sweda to Osweda, that road was awarded in 2012. Up to today, not up to 150 million has been paid. All the areas the contractor has done have been washed away. Now, Okiwe Afikpo to Ugep, which my brother here is from, that road is no go area at all. Up to now, in 2002, the bridge linking Afikpo to Ugep was designed and approved by Ministry of Works. To date, it has not seen the light of the day. So we will also look at this budget because we are talking of budget of development, budget to encourage production and productivities. We will please, I plead and plead that while I support the passage of this appropriation bill, I also want us to look into these two roads that are in my state, about Abia State, Cross River State, Imo State. The two roads are very important, Mr. President. I submit that we should look into and pass this budget. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Senator Sandu-Ono.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, I do know that a lot of colleagues have commended the President on the timeline that he has kept, but I think it is important that I lend my voice to it because we cannot afford to take that for granted. I do remember, Mr. President of Senate, that last year you made that point and you ensured that you met with the presidency and extracted a commitment that our budget cycle must revert to January to December. So I was delighted when this year it was kept. I told you before that we are senators of the Federal Republic, and when something good is done, whether we are in the opposition or not, we should say so. In the same way, we will say so if it is not well done. So I commend the President and I commend you, Mr. President of Senate. Mr. President, the budget is a very critical matter. So when it is on this floor, just like such issues of national importance, our constituents across the country expect that we should come together and give it the objectivity it deserves. So when yesterday the minority leader was speaking, and I heard a lot of voices trying to drown him from the left side of the aisle, I was wondering. But I think a lot of repair on that has...
No, it's from the right side of the aisle.
Time up. No, you can't harass me with that. Mr. President, so I think today a lot of repair has been done. The Deputy Senate President and Senator Bamidele and most other senators from the right side of the aisle did justice to the budget. Mr. President, I think this budget in some sense, like many other budgets before now, could aptly be referred to as an architecture of numerical colors. What I mean is that we seem to throw a lot of figures into our budget, even when we know that these are not realizable. I think it is wrong. You know, you put a budget together and you know that the budget will not balance out. Why do we do that to ourselves? Mr. President, I'll break it down so we understand it critically or clearly. You know, we had sums, for instance, for constituency projects. Based upon the sums that we had the understanding that they were going to be funded maximally. And then you go ahead and budget for the projects you have. I got a call from one of the foremost traditional rulers in my constituency to the effect of what I budgeted to do in his palace. If I go back to him and begin to explain to him why I can only do 50% of what he thinks has been budgeted, it becomes an issue. The point I'm making is that I think it is time we become more realistic rather than trying to be too elegant with the figures that we budget. Proper budgeting is good for us. It takes pressure away from government and from some of us who are functionaries of government. We shouldn't live a lie at all. Mr. President, there must be some symmetry between the enthusiasm that comes with the monies we budget for some of these palliative projects and the end result of it. There is a hiatus between the monies budgeted and the effects on the ground. We must interrogate this process properly, Mr. President. I think it is very important. The ideas are well thought out, the projects are properly thought out, but I think the implementation is still a very worrying challenge for us. I think it is important we look into it. Mr. President, the issue of borrowing has been addressed. I know many of my colleagues have said there is nothing wrong with borrowing, but borrowing should not be a culture that is unrepentant. And we must work in such a way that monies borrowed are targeted at proper things that should help this economy rev up for the greater good of the generality of Nigerians. Mr. President, I've not really seen in this budget monies devoted to manufacturing that will bolster our economy, consolidate it, and make sure that we come out from these cycles of poverty that we are presently experiencing. I think government should also deliberately patronize what is our own. I take the example of Innocent Motors, Mr. President. This establishment is doing so well. I do not know how much of government patronage it is having. We need it because properly patronized, these industries that are homegrown will do better than they are doing now. Finally, Mr. President, the President himself in his budget speech, in the concluding paragraphs, in paragraph 84 particularly, said this, and I would like to end with it. Let me re-emphasize that Nigerians expect that the 2021 budget will contain only implementable and critical projects, which when completed will significantly address current structural challenges of the economy, improve the business environment, and accelerate economic recovery. So even Mr. President is hopeful that a lot of the projects put here will be completed and implemented. We cannot hope any less. Let us hope that at the end of the day, when next year, by the grace of God, we are reviewing this budget, our hopes would not have been misplaced. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Senator Surajudeen, do you want to speak? And that will be the final. Do you want to? Okay. Well, Senate Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, having come to the conclusion of today's deliberations and debates, I rise to move a motion for this Senate to adjourn until tomorrow, 15th October 2020 at 10 a.m. prompt. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I rise to second the motion that this Senate do adjourn till tomorrow, 15th of October at 10 a.m. prompt. I so second.
Before I put the question, let me say that tomorrow will be the last and final day allotted for the debate on the 2021 budget estimates. and we'll round it up. So I will make my comments at the end of the debate tomorrow. With this, let me thank everyone who has contributed to the debate today. Those in favor of the motion that the Senate do adjourn till tomorrow, Thursday, the 15th? 15th day of October 2020 at 10 a.m. prompt, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The Senate is hereby adjourned till tomorrow, Thursday, 15th October 2020 at 10 a.m. prompt.